Hey, Slatherings, good to see you. Trying to get to my good cam, but for some reason I misconnected this year. So, all right, let's get started. See, the real big people have a technical manager. Hold on one second. Hey, BL, thank you. Yeah, I had some notes here when I was trying to mess with the camera. Looks like I accidentally deleted them. So we'll just wing it because there's a lot of important stuff I want to go over tonight. All right, we'll just wing it tonight. So, got a lot of stuff to go over. I want to go over as you see from the title. I want to get to Turtleboy. He comes on at 9 o'clock, so we're going to try to get as much in as we can here. I want to go over some of the things that I disagree with in his analysis of the Karen Reed case. First, I want to tease you with this. I learned something new this week about psychopaths that I guarantee none of you knew about. I didn't know about it until this week. I just kind of looked into it on a hunch. And it's actually the kind of thing where if you suspect there's a psychopath in your life, you might be able to use a little trick out of this information I'm going to give you to help smoke them out, which could be kind of interesting. Another big thing I want to go over is there was a big article in the Boston Globe today. This was about a case that Turtleboy has covered, and I've talked about on the show. This was the incident in South Boston, projects in South Boston about a month ago, where the fire department was called, the 911 for a man-woman who is a transgender man, or I get it confused. He's a biological male that I believe was claiming to be a transgender woman who was unconscious on the floor, seemingly due to a drug overdose. The fire department responded there, and there were kids found in the back room. This is a huge controversy now, and there's so much to reveal on this case here. We'll get back to that. There's a few new things I want to talk about on Delphi. Nothing too major, but something interesting. So stick around for the end of the show for that, because we get a lot of Delphi case people in here. But first, the dog's barking. First, let's go to Turtleboy's case here. So he listed today, or the other day, he made a video where he listed 50 key points. And I have this here. So, all right, I got it here somewhere, the article. All right. So what I did was I took his video. These were 50 key points on the Karen Reed case that he says you can't ignore and still end up and still believe that Karen Reed might not be innocent. Okay, so I'm going to go over each one of those points. But before I do, I know we get a lot of Turtleboy fans in here. Well, I'm a fan too. That doesn't mean that we can't criticize him. In fact, I would say that if Turtleboy could clone himself and turn himself into and set free the new Turtleboy that he created, I have the feeling that the copied Turtleboy would go on and try to criticize the existing Turtleboy, because that's what Turtleboy does. He's kind of fearless, and I think that's the way we should approach it. We shouldn't be afraid to ask questions in Turtleboy's analysis of things. So I think he does. He enjoys the combat, and he expects his fans to sometimes question some of the things he has, the conclusions that he reaches. And if he snaps at you, that's okay. He is a turtle. Turtles tend to snap, but I think he enjoys it. And I think he welcomes it. And I think at the end of the day, it makes him stronger. Because the thing is we do need Turtleboy. I don't agree with everything that he does. I don't agree with all of his conclusions or his approach. But there's no alternative to Turtleboy when it comes to confronting the mainstream media, the mainstream narratives, the powers that be in New England, in the Boston area. That's it. So if there's a story out there that runs against the grain of those that are in power, whether they're in law enforcement or in politics or whatever, there's nowhere to go. You're not going to go to Channel 5. You're not going to go to the Boston Globe. In fact, just looking at this story that today in the Boston Globe on the situation in the projects, it's been 4 weeks since that story happened, and they're finally reporting on it, only because Boston city councilors are going to visit this, and our one of our esteemed congressmen, Lynch from South Boston, is talking about it. They can't ignore it anymore. So, but why does it take them 3 weeks to cover this shit? Because they cover up anything that doesn't fit their agenda. That's just the reality of it. So, and there's a lot of stories like that. Sometimes it's ideological, but sometimes it just has to do with people in power in the state of Massachusetts, which, like any state, can be very tribal. And where else are you going to go if you don't go to Turtleboy? So, and he does take this stuff. Now, sometimes I think his conclusions can be a little bit too harsh or too quick. But that's his job kind of too, because he has to get really kind of full. He's kind of like the shock jocks that were around in the 80s and the early 90s. He's kind of that version in politics, and he needs to be that way. So I would suspect that he understands that. So let's just go to this. I have a transcript from his video. So he had these top 50, and I'm just going to go over some of them. So number 50 on his list for reasons why you're crazy if you think Karen Read might not be innocent. So Michael Proctor, he mentions how Michael Proctor, who was the state trooper in charge of the investigation, interviewed Jennifer McCabe and Brian Albert, but he did not interview them in the home. So why wouldn't he do that? Well, I think Turtleboy's right to say that's suspicious, but also, some things are going to be explained here, not necessarily by corruption or a cover-up of a murder. Sometimes you're going to see police inefficiency, police not doing their job well. And I think especially in cases that involve other cops, sometimes they're covering things up, but they don't they're not intending to cover up murder. So I think that if a dead body of anybody ends up on the lawn of a cop, sad to say, that's probably going to be their approach. They're going to try to avoid going in the guy's house because the thin blue line, if you're on the other side of it, they got to protect each other. And some of that's just human nature, but some of that does involve a level of corruption, and it shouldn't go on, especially in cases that involve a dead body. So it's a legitimate point by Turtleboy. Further down on his list, so again, he talks about reading what the witnesses, let's see. So he's talking about, again, these interviews. This transcript came through a little funky, but he calls Michael Proctor a known liar and an unethical, corrupt cop. See, I wouldn't go that far. Now, it may turn out to be the case, but I don't think that's been proven yet. I do think that there's enough sloppiness in this case. Now, you can take that sloppiness and say, all right, here's a sloppy cop, or you can say it's a sign of corruption. Now, I do know police that I've talked to, and they find all the misspellings and things like that to be highly suspicious. So it's not that I disagree with Turtleboy on his conclusions on this. I just think maybe he's taken a little too far to say he's a liar and he's unethical. And I think when he's talking about lying, for instance, he's talking about Michael Proctor said that the car was towed, that Karen Read's car was towed at 5:50 when in fact it was towed at 4:30. So yeah, that looks pretty bad. But again, I don't know. It may be a bit of a reach to say he's a liar and an unethical and corrupt cop. I think that's a little stronger than is fair at this point. Which all of this may turn out to be true. The next thing that he talks about is the 3-point turn, and I think this is true too. Now, where do we get the information that Karen Reed did do a 3-point turn, well, it actually comes from Karen Reed, but you can mistrust that because it's not like she said so later on or said so on camera. She supposedly said at the scene that she performed a 3-point turn. And again, it's only Michael Proctor. Well, I'm not even sure about that. Michael Proctor wasn't there at that time. So maybe, I'm not sure if maybe that was reported by the Canton police to Michael Proctor. I don't know. So there's a lot of reasons to be, anytime you're dealing with hearsay and stuff like that. So maybe it was Jen McCabe who told Michael Proctor that Karen Reed said that. I'm not really sure because I don't think Michael Proctor met with Karen Reed until hours later, because initially it was the Canton police that took over that handled the investigation, obviously, and then later on, Michael Proctor was called in, maybe late morning. So I'm sure by that point, Karen Reed was either back at John O'Keefe's house or already on her way home to her parents' house at Dighton. But so I'm not sure when Karen Reed or who she even said this about the 3-point turn to. We know it fits their theory because at some point they became aware of the broken taillight. And the only way, so they started connecting these dots. Broken taillight must have hit him doing a 3-point turn. But it is also true, as Turtleboy does an excellent job pointing out in his other videos, that Karen Reed had no reason to do a 3-point turn. All she had to do was just ride straight going home. Now, she wasn't from the area, so it's possible she didn't know that and turned around to retrace her steps. But it's also interesting that nobody saw her do a 3-point turn. And Jen McCabe was somewhat frequently watching from the window, but her husband, Matt, was strangely standing in the open door. The inside door was open and the storm door was closed, but he was standing there presumably watching for John O'Keefe, who'd been invited to the party. And he didn't see Karen Reed do a 3-point turn. And they did see her movements. So at one point she moved forward from where she was parked. She initially parked at the driveway, probably to drop John off, but maybe not. And then moved forward to eventually not far from where John O'Keefe's body was found. That movement was also described by the witness outside, sitting in the car, who was there to pick up his sister. His name escapes me at the moment, but so that ties together. So one of the next points Turtle makes. So let's see. So Karen Reed was the only one that was ever treated as a suspect in the case. Is that suspicious? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I think that what we see in any of the crime cases that I've investigated, going all the way back to the Lizzie Borden case, is that once a narrative forms and that the police are buying into, that's it. Everybody buys into it. There are no Inspector Columbos out there trying to pry into what really happened or go down the unexplored road. That just doesn't happen. Once the police buy in to a narrative, that becomes the narrative. And a lot of times in these cases going back, that thing sticks. Even if it ends up being a total wrong road, that thing sticks all the way up right through to the prosecution and right up until sometimes you put the wrong person in jail, and often on bad evidence. It's not necessarily corruption, but it's bad police work. But it seems to be very common. It's really just kind of human nature to a degree. You get this group conformity element where people start buying into a narrative. This is what happened. So at some point, the narrative formed there that Karen Reed had done this. She clearly contributed to that because, I mean, unless everybody's lying, so you have Kerry Roberts, who was in the car, and you have Jen McCabe. I don't think there's any reason to suspect Kerry Roberts. And then you have the police. It seems like at that point when Karen Reed was hysterical, she was worried that she did accidentally hit him and leave him at the scene. Whether that idea was planted in her head, that seems pretty Machiavellian to me and pretty sophisticated. These people that would supposedly be pulling off this conspiracy, they're not evil geniuses, I don't think. But, I would think that maybe Karen Reed if she is innocent, that maybe she just had that false thought that she was worried. Oh my God, did I do this? Because she had no reason to suspect something had happened inside the house at that point. So somehow she got that idea and that stuck with the police. But curiously, the Canton police, as I've talked before in the video, I've been talking about this for a month and nobody seemed to back me up until that great guest that Turtleboy had on his show last week, the cop said the same thing as me. And that is, you don't collect blood drops at the scene of a hit and run. You don't. If you want blood from the victim, you can just take it from his vein. You only collect blood if you think that blood might belong to someone else. And so that tells me that the police, the Canton police, those first cops looked at the blood and said, aha, this guy was in a fight, and this might be the guy who was, this might be that person. That's how we can, this might lead to the identity of the person he was in a fight with. So that's what I've been saying for a long time. That cop, the other cop, retired DEA agent that Turtleboy interviewed, I think is Sean McCabe. Not Sean McCabe. God, I can't remember his name. But anyways, that was a really good point. And that tells you the Canton police did not believe initially that this is a hit and run or Karen Reed backing up. And so, but at some point that narrative got established, and it seems to have, and it's gone all the way up to the medical examiner, who obviously by the time she got that body, it had reached her. And so she wasn't even looking to find, she was looking just to affirm that narrative, which is a terrible way to do an investigation. But I think it goes on, unfortunately, everywhere. I just think, it's not corruption. It's just, in those cases, it's a lot of time, it's just bad investigative work by everybody involved. But it could be corruption too. So the next thing, this is a really interesting point too. He points out that there was never an accident reconstruction report that ever took place. And I don't understand that either. To me, those accident reconstruction reports are routine, and they're done in any significant accident, and they're done fairly quickly. So I don't understand why one wasn't done, or maybe one was done, and because the state police were still confused about what happened, they haven't reported or didn't finalize a report. But that, even again, that would be suspicious. Not suspicious of corruption, but suspicious of why is the DA pursuing a case when the police can't even come up with an accident reconstruction report because they don't understand what happened, and they can't come up with any plausible theory about what happened. So then Turtleboy also points out that how can you explain how John O'Keefe ended up 12 feet on the lawn? And that's a good point. It's a good question. We're all wondering that. If Karen Reed struck him in reverse, how does he end up being, she clearly didn't hit him hard enough to launch 12 feet. This guy was 6'3", 220 pounds. So it doesn't make sense. It's very hard to come up with the problem with this case. I'll go over this maybe a little at the end, and I went over this in the Evil Genius episode I did, is no theory makes sense on either side. It doesn't, the conspiracy doesn't make sense, and the Karen Reed did it to make sense. I mean, none of these theories make about as much sense as an alien craft leaning down and striking them in the head. I mean, nothing makes sense. So I do think it's a legitimate thing to worry about. I did wonder, is it possible, like, for instance, if she struck him, did he stagger up onto the lawn? Which does make sense. That's the only, well, not makes sense, but it's the only plausible kind of explanation that I can think of, is that he staggered up onto the lawn. But you could ask the same question from the other side. If you believe that the killers killed him inside the house and then carried his body out, why would they put him 12 feet up on the lawn? I mean, these guys are ingenious killers. And when you think of all the details they must have thought of, why wouldn't they put him on the street? Why wouldn't they put him at least in the gutter, on the edge of the street, so it would be more plausible? Why would they throw him in the lawn? I mean, you can ask a lot of other questions, like why wouldn't they put him on someone else's lawn? Or why, I mean, there's got to be better ways to get rid of the body than like putting them on your own lawn. But so I think there's questions everywhere on this. So next thing he points out is that the prosecution has no theory of what happened. I do find that interesting, and it does seem to me that the prosecution keeps changing its theory, but so does the defense. Although the burden is not on the defense to have to come up with a theory. It really is on the prosecution. If you're going to charge someone, you should have, it seems to me you should have a theory about what happened, but not necessarily. So for instance, let's say you can't make sense of all the evidence, but you do have the black box data, and it shows Karen Reed struck someone at exactly the time when his phone last moved at 12:31. If you have that data, it'd be hard not to prosecute Karen Reed, even though you still can't make sense of the blood drops and the injury on the back of the head and where he ended up on the lawn and a bunch of other things. And So, but you'd still have to charge him because you have that kind of data, and then you just kind of hope eventually you can explain the rest as a trial proceeds, and should uncover some of that. But it is odd that they don't have a theory. It's not just that they sit there and say we don't know everything that happened. They don't even have a plausible theory. Whether it's coming up with road abrasions for the arm, or the fact that I think at one time they floated that the cocktail glass was used by Karen Reed and some kind of slashing thing on his arm. That none of that stuff makes sense. And he has a very specific wound on the back of his head, and you have to explain it. So let's see. Moving on down. We're only on to number 43. So that no one interviewed the plowman. I don't know. I'm not really bothered by that. So the plowman drove by and didn't see him. When I look at the photos there, it looks to me that there's a bush. That you got the fire hydrant and there's a bush behind it. So to me, it's not implausible that because he was 12 feet on the lawn, he looked to be kind of maybe in the shadow of a bush. And so that's, to me, is why I think there's a good chance a plowman wouldn't see him. Well, I tell you, I'm sure it's different now, but back in my bartending days, early on, like in the late 80s, those plow guys used to come in the bar all the time, and they were always loaded. I don't think things are done like that anymore, but they were loaded. So number 41 on Turtle's list is the angry voicemail that Karen Reed left. This is it's an interesting point, and I talked about similar things in my episode of one way or the other. There's an evil genius behind this. Either Karen Reed is an evil genius, or there was an evil genius inside that house on 34 Fairfield Road, because so many strange things would require like thinking multiple steps ahead to make this happen. But I think Turtleboy's point is that why would Karen Reed called? So when she got home, I'm calling home, John O'Keefe's home where she was living, she called him all night, left angry voicemails, sent angry text messages, really angry ones. So why would you do that if you knew you had left him dead on the side of the road? I don't know. I mean, it does seem unlikely to me that he would do that. Is it crazy? Well, she goes home, she's drunk, and if maybe she hit him and didn't mean to, but by the time she gets home, she's kind of processing this in different ways through her drunken mind, and she's angry because maybe part of her knows her life is ruined now, and she's blaming him because he's the one that made her go to that address or whatever the reason. And so she's saying, I hate you. And in the message, she's somehow processed it. She split her mind a little bit because she's now trying to, people compartmentalize things in their minds all the time that they don't want to think because for reasons of cognitive dissonance where you don't feel good about it. So in that case, you would have somebody putting this in the back of their mind that she might have done that and just focusing on the anger that she had for him. Again, I'm not buying into that. I believe that the reason that she was calling was because she probably thought he stayed there and was hooking up with someone. That's what most women in that situation would think. I mean, he's been drinking. They're not married. They have been having difficulties. He's dropped off at a house where, I don't want to go too deep into this, but, we're all hearing, I think anybody that knows people that there's, I don't want to say it. I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to smear anybody. So, but maybe Turtleboy's mentioned this stuff, so I'll go with that. But anyways, there was reasons to believe that there might have been some possible sexual activity going on with some of the members in that house. So I'm sure Karen Reed was aware of that and maybe not have been too thrilled that John was there and wasn't taking her calls. I don't know. So that's the most likely explanation for her angry phone calls and messages, and that does suggest innocence. But again, it's complicated, so clearly we have to look at everything here. So Turtle is one of his next item is that he doesn't believe that it's possible that nobody would hear the accident if she had backed into him. He says, so that no one saw or heard a man being hit with such tremendous force that it knocked him to the ground, nor did anyone hear him calling for help. A house full of people, not a single person heard that thud boom of a man being hit with such force by or the screeching of a tire or of him screaming out in agony. I'm reading from a transcript. The transcript program is not perfect, so a little bit of that might, if it sounds funny, it's not Turtleboy sounding funny, it's the transcript. But I don't know if I buy into any of that, because I don't think there was, you're not going to hit, I don't think you're going to hear that accident. Yes, if there was screeching tires, you would hear that, but there's also no evidence of that at the crime scene that I've seen. So I don't find it unusual. If she hit him, I don't find it unusual that nobody heard anything. And it sounds like his death was, if not instant, it sounds like he was unconscious. So I don't think he would have been screaming or calling for help or any of that. So next on his list, but instead, so you're talking about how John was unscathed. Yeah, and I agree with this, and I've talked about this before. I don't understand how that injury could come on the back of his head. I don't understand it, and not leave other injuries on his torso or on his legs. If the theory is that he was hit by a taillight on the back of his head, this is a 6'3" guy. The taillight's pretty low, and he's hit square on the back of the head. So how now? My understanding of a vehicle is that the bumper is right below the taillight and juts out. That's the purpose of the bumper. So how did the bumper? So if he's crouched down, let's say he's picking up the cocktail glass that was found there. Let's say he dropped it and he wanted to pick it up. How is it possible that he gets hit in the back of the head? Now let's say he saw the vehicle coming and turned at the last second, but still, then the bumper hits him in the shoulder. If he doesn't turn, the bumper hits him in the back or it hits him in the legs or something. I don't understand. I mean, unless he was lying on his stomach and lifted his head and which just seems preposterous. So, and I do think that, the state absolutely has to explain that. You can't just ignore that, especially when his only injuries were the scratches and abrasions or whatever on his arms and the back of his head, and maybe a little bit, some minor cuts on his face. That's it. Now, his eyes were very swollen. Now, that's either due to blows on his face, or if the medical examiner is correct, that was due from the crushed skulls in the back of his head. But there needs to be other injuries on his body for any theory to make sense. Next, Turtleboy talks about the pool owned by Tim Albert at the home that was filled in the next year. I don't find that suspicious at all. People fill in pools. The family was getting older, and there was really no one to take care of that pool except for the wayward younger brother of the Alberts. What are they going to bury in the pool? I mean, if you're trying to get rid of some clothing or, bloody clothing or something like that, there's a million places to do it, and it's not going to be in Canton, because it's not like you were on foot and had to get rid. You weren't in a hurry. They had more than a year to get rid of this evidence. So certainly, if the theory was that it went in the pool, in the buried pool, that was, I don't know, I think it was in October that it was filled in or something. So you're talking like 9 months. So in that 9 months, they had plenty of other ways to get rid of items like clothing. You just dump it off the highway some way. I mean, there's a million places to do it. You don't have to put it in a buried pool. So let's see. Have you actually checked out? Oh, this was interesting. So I don't know if this might have been in a recent article by Turtleboy, and I was on vacation. I might have missed a couple. I don't know, but this was really interesting. So one of the big disputes here is that the prosecution is saying that, the defense is saying that Jennifer McCabe, on her phone, that it shows that she searched, that she Googled for how long to die in the cold at 2:27 a.m. And if that does prove to be true, I can't imagine any way that Jen McCabe is innocent. But the prosecution has their own experts. First, there was Trooper Guerrero of the state police, and then apparently they've hired another outside expert who has said that search never took place, that the search only took place at about 6:17 or something like that, which is after they arrived at the accident scene. So that's disputed right now. But apparently what the prosecution has defended that is by saying that she couldn't have been searching that, because at that time, at that very moment, she was searching for the Ozone basketball website, which is, I guess, where her daughters played. And so apparently somebody has told Turtleboy that they went to that, and there's really nothing on that website. They don't show any scores or schedules or anything like that. I don't know. I can't verify that, but that's really interesting. If that ought to be stuff that you can definitely even go back through the Wayback Machines of that store these things and find out what was on that website at that time. And if there's nothing on it, yeah, it looks pretty suspicious. And not only suspicious for Jan McCabe, but of the state. So because the whole theory here is that basically either Karen Reed did this or the state is kind of involved with this conspiracy to cover it up. That's why this is such a juicy story. And this really, if it turns out that there is such a conspiracy, I said this from day one, this is bigger than the Murdaugh case, and the Murdaugh case, whatever his name is. It doesn't get that kind of national attention yet. But I mean, this is just one of the mother of all crazy TV drama. This would be like something you couldn't write. There's just so many complications to the cover up. Number 32 on his list. You have to ignore that Jen McCabe deleted all her calls. All right, same thing. So this is the big thing, is did she delete the calls that she supposedly made to Brian Albert inside the house while she was sitting in the car and John O'Keefe was on the lawn and they were trying to revive him? The prosecution says no. The defense expert said yes. This is where I kind of disagree. Not disagree, but I disagree with the strength of Turtleboy's conclusions on this, is that we just don't know. The defense expert does have a motive to try to interpret the story in their way. That's why they're hired by the defense. Now, you could make the case that this defense expert, if it turns out that he's wrong on this, he's ruined his whole reputation. And it seems like this is what he does for a living. This is what their company does, is data analysis. So I can't imagine that they'd want to screw this up. But still, at the end of the day, you have a dispute between them and the police and the prosecution. Now, the prosecution claimed at the most recent hearing that they hired a new independent expert that supposedly has a long list of qualifications, and she agrees with Trooper Guerrero. But again, they're going to hire someone they know is going to agree with their conclusions. So we just don't have any. This stuff isn't going to get settled until the trial. There's no independent way you can settle it. So, and even at a trial, you're going to hear one side's experts and the other side's, and the jury has to decide. And we in the public have to. When we hear that, that's all we can do is do our best. Let's see, number 31. You have to ignore that Jen McCabe called O'Keefe 6 times in a panic between 12:40 and 12:50. I didn't actually know that. I know I have the time of the text. I didn't know that she called at that time. She called him at 12. So here's the timeline. So O'Keefe and Karen Reed arrived at the house somewhere between. It's not known exactly yet, or at least it's not been identified. We should know, but apparently this data has not been released by the state yet, or it's not been released to the public. But somewhere around between 12:20 and say 12:25 is probably the time when they arrived. Jen McCabe had been communicating with O'Keefe, giving directions between texts and calls while they were in the car. At 12:29, Jen McCabe called him, and the phone connected. So he picked up, or somebody picked up on O'Keefe's phone, but only for 8 seconds. Now, my theory that I proposed is that John O'Keefe was inside the home at that point. He had already been knocked unconscious, and they wanted to find that phone. So either they had Jen call, or one of the guys grabbed Jen's phone and called. And maybe the phone had come out during the struggle, or maybe they just wanted to find it quickly on his clothing, where it was, what pocket it was in. And when they pulled it out or picked it up, they accidentally accepted the call. And it took them about 8 seconds to realize that before they hung up. And so that was my theory on that. But that's, again, every theory, there's a lot of crazy theories here that you might put in. So the other theory might be, though, that perhaps John was getting out of the car, and that's exactly, or more or less, when he was struck by Karen Reed, and he had the phone in his hand. So maybe, I don't know, maybe he had the phone in his hand and took the call, and somehow striking him was enough to make the phone hang up. That seems a little unlikely to me. It seems like the phone would not hang up and you'd actually hear the accident. So, or at least, it wouldn't have been recorded, but whoever was calling, so Jen McCabe would have heard the accident. So I'm reaching for theories here on that stuff, so I don't know. So she called at 12:29. Then she texted him right at 12:31. John O'Keefe's phone stopped moving at 12:31, 12:32. So she sent him a text basically saying, "Where are you?" And at that same time, that's when he last moved. She texted him again at, I know for a fact at 12:40 and at 12:45, and there might have been another text in there too. I think those were the last two actually. So I think she texted him at 12:31, 12:40, and 12:45. What I didn't know until Turtleboy pointed this out, so I'd have to see it, but I trust him that there were more calls too. So, but it makes sense to me that she'd be calling him if she didn't know where he was, and he, if this time is going by, and it's like, where are you? You should be out there. You should be in the house by now. So that makes sense to me that she'd be calling him. So I'm not sure exactly how that points to Karen Reed's guilt. So the Commonwealth claims that McCabe. All right, this is another interesting point. So, as I said, the Commonwealth says, the state of Massachusetts says that she never Googled how long to die in the cold at 2:27. But then Turtleboy points out a few weeks ago, they filed a motion to cancel an evidentiary hearing where the prosecutor was going to cross-examine forensic expert Richard Green, who was the guy that the defense has hired. So he's the one that said that the search was made at 2:27. They flew him up for that hearing, and then they didn't allow it. But what Turtleboy's not saying here is the reason why the hearing was canceled. And it's not hiding anything about Richard Green, because we're going to hear him at the trial. The reason the evidentiary hearing was canceled was because of the moves made by Reed's defense lawyers. And I covered this in my video. They took a report, a ruling by the judge the week before when she said it was okay to go after the dog data. And she indicated that the defense's theory that O'Keefe had gone in the house was reasonable, something to that effect. I'm not quoting it. But so the defense looked at that and said, aha, now we can really zone in for the kill. We can do something that we know we wouldn't want to do. And so what they did was they subpoenaed Michael Proctor, the state police officer leading the investigation, and Trooper Garino, the data expert from the state police. That's not something that the judge looked favorably on. And if the judge hadn't said the week before that the defense's theory reasonable, they wouldn't have risked doing that, because they knew judges don't go for that. The judge is not going to go for putting the state police or the local police, whoever the police were that handled the investigation, they're not going to go for putting them on trial, which is exactly what the defense team was doing. The defense team knew that under normal circumstances that would fly, but they risked it. And it turned out to be a bad gamble, because that's the reason that Lally applied for this. He called for the court to do an emergency hearing to cancel the next hearing because of all that. And at that hearing, the judge made clear she was not happy with the defense lawyers, and she did cancel. So that was a blown opportunity, but it had nothing to do with trying to hide the evidence that Richard Green is going to present. That's going to come out in trial. It's going to be Richard Green versus Trooper Guerrero and whatever this expert is that they've hired. So let's go a little further down. We've got about 20 minutes left before we run into his show. So, and I do have some other things I want to go over, so I'm going to try to get through this. So Turtleboy says you have to ignore that while these Google searches were going on. All right, again, that was the same thing about the cross-examining. So let's go a little further down. We're almost getting to the top 10. That's where the good stuff is. And where Turtleboy makes some great points, but also some areas where I think we have some reasons to be suspect. So let's jump down a little further to the top 10. I didn't highlight those here, so I'm going to go through them. All right, so number 10. You have to ignore that the Ring camera footage from John O'Keefe's home that would have shown Karen Reed's taillight when she got home is also mysteriously missing, and that the only party requesting the Ring camera footage is the defense. Okay, I don't agree with this as being conclusive about anything, because if Karen Reed destroyed that ring footage, and she very well might have been clever enough to do that, the defense would still be asking for it, because they don't, Karen Reed didn't tell them she destroyed it, and they know they're not going to get it. If Karen Reed destroyed it, it's destroyed. The state's not going to have that evidence. So it just makes the defense look good by asking for it. So I don't, and in fact, I think when Turtleboy, he had an excellent exchange with John O'Keefe's brother, and I think O'Keefe's brother pointed out that Karen Reed destroyed those ring systems. I don't know that she did. I'm just saying it's very possible that she did. So to me, that doesn't really show anything in terms of proving Karen Reed was innocent. I mean, it could go either way on that. Number 9, John O'Keefe's brother described his body as looking like he went 5 rounds of Tyson. Yeah, it looks like that, but the medical examiner had a different explanation. So we don't know how far, I think there's a good chance the medical examiner was just buying into the narrative that they got. That's what they do. Unfortunately, they should be doing an independent analysis, but I think it's common that they don't. Everybody's on the same team, the prosecution, the police, everybody. It's just kind of typical of cases. But if she's accurate, then the swelling that is in his eyes was from the broken bones in the back of his head. But interestingly, too, if that's the case, I'm not a medical expert, but would the swelling, if John O'Keefe whacked his head, let's say he was hit and fell on the back of that fire hydrant, and it put that massive wound, it crushed his skull, it put multiple fractures in the back of his skull, and then he was found lying on his back. Would swelling still go to the eyes, even though you're lying on your back? It might. I really don't know. But it seems like it's more likely to if you were lying on your front for a time. So would that possibly be consistent with him being struck inside the house and then lying on his side or lying on his stomach for a time long enough? Only a few minutes would be enough to get the swelling to go into the eyes. It wouldn't take long at all. So let's see. Number 7, you have to ignore that Brian Albert, a trained first responder, never came outside after McKay. Yeah, I mean, this bothers everybody. This bothers me too. I'd be curious if anybody knows where the Albert's bedroom was. Was it facing the street? Because, or even I think they had other people in the house, like a kid or something like that. If anybody, certainly, I mean, if Albert's and his wife were lying in bed, and their bedroom is facing the street, and all of a sudden you've got sirens coming from every direction and blue lights, and the sun is just barely up. It's a gloomy January day and it's snowing. Those lights are going to be extremely visible in your room. The sirens, all that activity on your lawn. You're a cop. You couldn't be drunk enough that you wouldn't be aware of that was going on. You're a cop. You hear that stuff. You're trained to be on call, on call with a pager most of the time. These guys are trained to wake up in any kind of emergency. And all indications are that Brian Albert was a very attentive, dutiful cop that always showed up, that always responded. So it just seems amazing to me that somebody like that would be unaware of all this going on his lawn. Now, even if he didn't know who was out there, as soon as he saw that, he'd go out. But then you look out the window and you see that your sister-in-law is out there, and presumably at some point somebody's called you and told you that it's a fellow Boston cop who was invited to your party. To me, one of the most powerful things in this case is the fact that seemingly the Alberts never came out. Even like I could see if the EMS got there and they didn't pronounce John O'Keefe dead on the scene, so they would have got him into the ambulance pretty quickly. But still, now the police are still out there flashing lights, doing an investigation. They were out there for hours. At no point, Albert went out there to say, hey, what's going on? And it seems like Jen McCabe was out there for a long time too. At no point, anybody goes, it's really, really strange. And it's one of the most troubling parts of this case that points to their guilt. But again, it's really hard to make there's a lot of other, no matter how you look at this case, there are things that aren't going to add up. So let's see, let's get to the next one. I'm just kind of walking. All right, he talks about the crime scene, how it wasn't secured. I don't know. It's true. It seems like a really sloppy investigation. Is this because it was on a weekend? Did it have something to, I don't think that was a holiday weekend, but I don't know what the excuse is. Obviously there was a snowstorm going on. Did the people just consider this? Did they quickly just decide that this case was so case closed, that it was a hit and run, that they just didn't do a very thorough investigation because it was snowing out, and who wants to get snowy? I don't know. It is a little, but I don't know how not securing the crime scene. I mean, I guess Turtleboy's point is that if you don't secure the crime scene, mark it off with yellow tape and keep a cruiser there all day, then it becomes easier to slip false evidence onto the scene, which is true. But it's a whole, man. When you're talking about asking people to cover up a murder, like Michael Proctor. This is the other thing. I have never seen. I follow all Turtleboy's reports, and I don't see any reason to believe that Michael Proctor was a good friend of the Alberts. Maybe he was, but I've not seen any evidence, and clearly everybody's trying to find it. The most we see is some evidence that they may have been to some events together, but that's not really surprising. There are events that are in Canton. They're all from Canton, right? And these are the kind of events that would draw police and police families. So is it really surprising that Jen McCabe's kids might end up in a photo where the state police were there doing something? I mean, that doesn't prove that. I would be shocking to me that Proctor didn't know Albert, but to show that they were friends, let alone close friends, let alone close enough to help cover up a murder, it's a big reach for me. That's a big reach, and I haven't seen that evidence yet. So let's see. Moving on. Number 4. You have to ignore that after being named as a suspect by Karen Reed's attorneys, Brian Albert not only sold his family home that had been in the family for multiple generations, but also got rid of their 6-year-old German Shepherd, and then had his basement floor replaced. Well, those things are suspicious. They're not conclusive suspicious. From what we understand, he has since gone through a separation and is in the process of getting divorced from his wife. Was that going on before that? His attorneys say that. We don't know. But if you're going through a divorce, then you usually end up selling the house. And if you sell the house, you do usually end up doing renovations. And that would include possibly the basement floor. I mean, we don't know that John O'Keefe was ever in that basement. So, I mean, it should have been investigated at that time, but I mean, it's not conclusive. Number 3, you have to ignore that John O'Keefe's phone was discovered underneath his body, not in his pocket. I'm not sure what this shows, because I've already floated a theory out there that this is what happened with the phone. If he was attacked inside the house, then Jen McCabe called him, or maybe more likely somebody inside like Higgins grabbed the phone, called it so they could find the phone. And then they were somehow, like I said, the evil genius somewhere. Well, the evil genius in this case would have been someone inside the Albert home. And he looked out, and they knew that Karen Reed was still sitting in the car outside waiting for John O'Keefe. And so they somehow had the idea that we better, if we want to make it seem like John O'Keefe was never inside this house, we better toss that phone out. So they tossed the phone out over into the snow near Karen Reed's car. She wouldn't see that, of course. She's sitting on the steering wheel looking forward. She wouldn't see that. And then Karen Reed drove away, say a couple minutes later. And so now they took the body outside, and they want to find the phone in the snow. What do? They text it, and it lights up, and you see it right there in the snow. So then you go over and you toss the body on it. Now, then the shoe and the cap was found off, and it was weirdly found not initially by the search. So I don't know why they wouldn't just, I don't know. Why wouldn't you just toss that with the body right then and there? But as far as the phone, it seems plausible to me that they threw it out in the snow that way. But it's also plausible that he had the phone in his hand, and just when he got struck or whatever happened to him, he ended up on top of his phone. I don't find that to be necessarily by itself suspicious. It's a key piece of information that we're going to have to keep looking at, and whatever side prevails, they're going to have to account for what happened. Let's see. So number 2, you have to ignore that he had a lateral gash on the back of his head. The gash has to be explained. So the process, I don't know if it's enough to look at that and say, all right, he definitely had to get killed inside the house. I mean, it does seem to me more consistent with me with someone striking him on the back of the head. Is it possible someone struck him on the back of the head outside? Is it possible? Could that possibly have happened from falling onto the fire hydrant or being knocked onto the fire hydrant? If he fell on the fire hydrant, then you don't even need Karen Reed. He could have just fallen on the. I mean, to me, it doesn't seem likely that you could fall and make such a specific wound like that and cry. But it's. I mean, you can't rule anything out in a really strange case like this. So let's see. Now let's get to number one. Let's see. Where is number one? All right. Finally, you have to ignore that his right arm is being covered in lacerations. Yeah, I mean, we've all talked about these lacerations. I don't know when I look at that was a dog bite. I don't know what it is. I researched, you can Google dog bites and you can look through 1,000 pictures and you might find a couple that say looks like that. But the other thing is when I've looked at dog bites like that, it seems like no two are alike. I mean, they're all very, very different. So I don't really know what those injuries are. We can't tell in that photo how deep they are. It looks like maybe some puncture wounds, but I just don't know. I can't say for sure. I mean, they look more like dog bites to me than certainly like road abrasions. But I mean, did his put his arm underneath the bumper and something happened? I wouldn't look at it conclusively. So let's put it that way. So before I get in and check out the comments, we're running up time. Now I want to get to. Well, let me just conclude in the Karen Reed thing. That's it. I don't know. I mean, I'm glad Turtleboy's covering this and exploring everything. I just don't feel 100% convinced of anything just because the level of conspiracy involved is strange. It would be really unlikely for people to think to throw the phone out in the yard because that phone was definitely in that snow by 12:32. So really, really strange to throw that they would think to do that. And it also, as I've said before, Karen Reed got home at 12:41. And that's roughly consistent with the idea of her leaving around somewhere between, say, 12:30 and 12:45. So it's probably maybe 12:30 and 12:40 even. Driving in the snow, driving slower. She must be a kind of a careful driver the way she's described sitting there. It probably would take her at least 10 minutes to get home. So it's pretty consistent with, she left around that time that phone last moved. So it is pretty consistent. Now, let's get to the psychopaths. This was interesting. So I've got a series coming out on Jeffrey Dahmer. And like you haven't had enough on Dahmer, right? But whenever I look at an investigation on this stuff, I try to find something new, something that maybe hasn't been reported. Well, one of the things that we all know about Jeffrey Dahmer is that everybody was complaining where he lived and he was doing these kind of murders about the awful stench that was coming first when he lived with it. His grandmother threw him out because of the stench, because he was killing bodies and bringing them back to the grandmother's house and dissecting them and doing his thing. And then famously, as we saw in the Netflix series, living in his apartment, he was doing all that stuff too. And the neighbors were complaining. And eventually he was in the process of being evicted right because of the stench. So I thought it was odd. I was like, no, clearly, obviously, if you let's say you work in a medical field, you start out in medical school and you're doing dissections or doing surgeries, and you have to get used to that awful smell. So, and then maybe at some point you're just used to it. And so you look at Jeffrey Dahmer and say, well, maybe he was just over time got used to it gradually. But when looking at his first kill, he was 18 years old. Here's something going on at my window. So 7-pounders getting mad at me, and I'll get back to it, but that's just the way it is. If people can't disagree or question any challenge, someone's going to get mad. I don't know what to say. So, I mean, I don't know if he's saying that to me, but anyways, I love you, 7-pounder, but we ought to be able to debate this evidence, So anyways, back to now Jeffrey Dahmer, and when he was 18 years old, he had the house to himself. His parents had divorced, and his mother and his younger brother had just moved out. he spotted a hitchhiker, a 19-year-old kid, and he talked him into going back to the house for beers, and then he struck him on the back with a weight, kind of similar to maybe what might have happened with John O'Keefe in the Karen Reed case. At least that's Turtleboy's theory, that he was hit with a dumbbell. Well, this is what Dahmer did to kill his first victim. So then he took him and he buried him in a shallow grave in the yard, and he was buried for about a week or two in the summer, and then he dug him up. And then at that point he defleshed it, which is something that he always wanted to do and he had done before with animals. So he kind of found it arousing. And then he pulverized the bones and threw them in the yard. So right away, right there, that smell would have been beyond toleration. And he already had that. So what I looked up was, do psychopaths, now psychopaths are born with a brain that has different wiring to it in the prefrontal cortex. The lights aren't all on. If you look at it, a psychopath's brain under a microscope, under an MRI, that region of the brain stays partly dark. It's like kind of flying over a neighborhood in a city, flying over a city, and all of a sudden you see a neighborhood where there's a blackout and most of the lights are out. That's what it looks like. Well, it turns out that in that same area is also it's responsible for decision making and most famously for empathy, emotional empathy, but it's also responsible in part for your sense of smell. So psychopaths it turns out, have a much weaker sense of smell. So if you have somebody in your life that you suspect might be a psychopath, and I'm not talking about a killer, because many psychopaths never become killers or even want to become a killer. They just don't feel empathy for other people. They might be more impulsive. There's a whole list of traits that go with it. You might be able to check it that way. Put something really, really smelly in front of them and see how they react. If they don't have much of a reaction, could be a psychopath. So let's see, what else do you want to go? I'm not sure if I'm going to have time to go into the South Boston story. So we'll come back to that because I know people want to get to Turtleboy. I just want to quickly look at the comments. And let's see if this argument here. I want to see how do you guys react to this. So let's see. See, I knew this was going to be. I'm not afraid to take this stuff on. All right. So hopefully you guys don't look at this and say, just because he says something I disagree with, that I'm going somewhere else, because that's what people in a cult do. And I don't, Turtleboy loves his fans, and his fans have helped making him what he is. And he is essential to uncovering these truths. But let's not become cultists here. Not everything anybody says in the world is always right. And it's definitely not the case that Turtleboy is always right. So, I mean, let's just not go down that road. Let's be, let's be welcome to ask questions, because questions are going to be asked. Looking through. So good to see everybody. Julio Suave, good to see you as always. 7 Pounder, great to see you. All right, so this is again, this is from 7 Pounder. He said, now I assume he's talking to me. You got your 15 minutes to be a devil's advocate. Then he wrote something that he deleted, so it must have been something telling me how stupid I am. And then 10 minutes, no toss, through the garage. All right, so Turtleboy's latest theory is that they drove him through the garage. This was not proposed by the defense, and it may be true. But now, because that's the latest theory, everybody that follows his channel is just going to accept that as though it was handed down from Moses on the mountain. Come on, guys. And I mean, he's got a whole bunch of other deleted messages. And I guess he's deleting all his messages. I mean, come on, guys. Don't. Hey, Benjamin John, I've been trying to get you the email. I've left it multiple times. So I've been looking for email and the spam and everything, and it doesn't seem to be there. So, I mean, listen, this case, the Karen Reed case, this crazy stuff on both sides that don't add up. And people ought to be able to, we don't know what happened. It's Turtleboy is absolutely correct that the prosecution has not come up with any kind of a coherent, plausible theory, but neither has the defense. The defense at one time floated this and that. And then a month ago, they floated the idea that maybe the body was was taken out hours later by the killers from inside the house. And the reason they came up with that was because obviously they heard the criticism that there were 11 people in the house. And it seems crazy, the idea that 11 people all agreed to be co-conspirators of a murder. So they had to come up with a new theory to try to correct that. But clearly the defense is a little bit reaching here for trying to come up with things to create reasonable doubt. That's their job. That's what they're supposed to do. But that's not our job, is to try to look at these things objectively and talk about them and come up with different ways of doing it. We don't know. There's no evidence that the people inside that house drove him out to the scene. That doesn't show up on anybody's Ring doorbell system. And there's no evidence of that. So, I mean, were there car tracks out there similar to consistent with that? I mean, it may have happened, but we don't know that. There are things that aren't explained here. And you can't just look at it from one side. I think that's a crazy way to approach any case. I'm sorry. That's just a crazy way. I don't even think Turtleboy really does it. I think he does it in his episodes because he knows that that's the position you have to take. He knows his job. He knows his role in this. His role in this is to hammer this side and to draw attention to it. And he's doing a fantastic job doing it. But all of these things don't make perfect sense. You can't insist that Jen McCabe made that search at 2:27 a.m. You have no basis for insisting that. Oh, I didn't. No, I didn't see. He shouldn't be. But I mean, people should just argue the points. And there's no. We don't know that she searched for how long to die in the cold at 2:27 a.m. We know there's one expert on one side, the defense side, that needs an expert to say that. He says it. We haven't heard him testify. We don't really know. We know that there are two. We know that there are two people on the prosecution side. Again, the same thing. How independent are those experts? They went and hired. Apparently, under pressure, they went and hired another independent expert who supposedly has credible. They say is credible. I don't know that. So to me, it's 50-50. I don't know that she searched for how long to die in the cold. I don't know that she deleted those calls. The prosecution says she didn't. So I don't know. I don't know how you just accept that and just say, well, it happened. What kind of country, what kind of thinkers do we have here if people aren't willing to be skeptical of any piece of information that they have? If you get information, you ought to be skeptical about it. Anything from any side, especially when it's coming from one side that is trying to help their case. It seems really odd to me that people wouldn't do that. And I think if we had Turtleboy off camera in a room, he does it too. I don't really understand how people don't question things, or if they get upset when someone else does question things. Anyways, I'm not going to go over. I don't think I'm going to go over the South Boston case tonight, but this is another really, because I'm getting kind of angry now just seeing that comments, and I apologize. I mean, 7-pounder's always here, so I'm glad to have him. But if he's upset with somebody questioning that stuff, and I've asked legitimate questions. You don't have to agree with all those questions, but those are legitimate questions. You can't sit there and tell me that you know for a fact that she made that search at 2:27. You cannot. And if you think that without any question, there's something wrong with you. All right, that's just the truth. And I'm sorry. I'm getting upset now because it bothers me when people don't know how to think. We don't know. You haven't looked at that phone. You're not a data expert. You just know that the defense team has said that. That's it. And you're going to accept that at face value? We know that she stopped searching. I'm sorry. We know that O'Keefe stopped moving at 12:31. So it's a difficult thing to explain how that phone got out there. I've speculated that the phone got tossed out there. But that's a really big leap to make. There's no evidence for it. It would be a strange thing to do. I assume he deleted his own comments, Dave. But I don't really understand it. I want to apologize and have a drink. This is something new I'm trying. This is, I thought it might be thirst quenching. It's called Truly Wild Berry. It's a seltzer. I don't usually drink the seltzers. I'm more of a beer guy, but these might be thirst quenching. So let's try it out. I'll check some comments, see if anybody else is mad at me or maybe anybody else wants to calm me down. I wish I could have you guys talk for a second. Do you guys really have absolutely, for those of you that think that Karen Read is innocent, do you really have no doubt? Even if, it's not, you're 100%, it's not 90-10, you're 100%. You don't doubt any of this evidence that's being given to you, spoon-fed to you by the defense. You have no doubt about that. You just accept it. Defense has told me this, and that's that. Turtleboy has told me this, so that's that. Are we incapable of thinking for ourselves? That seems insane to me. And now we're just going to assume that the body was driven out maybe 5 hours later. And that's why, the theory is always evolving. And that's why this goes with the idea that why they want to question the plow driver. So I guess now the defense's theory and Turtleboy's theory is that they kept this corpse inside the house. And I'm not even sure he was dead, because I think he might have, I don't know. I don't think he died right away. He was probably unconscious right away, but they kept him in the house for several hours. Why? Why would you, if you're trying to orchestrate a cover up, why do you keep the body in your house for several hours and then throw it outside sometime close to daylight or maybe even after sunrise? Does that seem plausible, or is that just a way to try to make things that don't add up on the defense's side work? It seems to me a little bit of that. I think it's did he drive it? Why are we forced to even come up with the idea that they drove the body out? I'm not sure. Maybe it's because they think it would be it would be not easy to carry that body. So it probably would take a few people struggling in the snow to do that. Maybe they have to theorize why there was not more footprints, in the snow if they carried it out. I don't know, but it just seems to me that to be so sure of this stuff, I don't have a problem with Turtleboy presenting it that way, I guess, because that's his job. He's not working for the defense, but he's working anti-establishment. He's anti what the establishment is trying to do in this state. And I think that's vitally important. And I'm glad he's doing it. But I don't think that we should just leave our brains at the door and just amen, and just follow everything he says and not question everything. And I don't think he'd want us to be like that. I think that's insane. So let's see. Dave's angry. I have the feeling Dave's just having fun. This is Dave Jenkins. So Proctor and Colin Albert were at the same wedding together. That's interesting. Again, it doesn't, that far from establishes that he's close friends with anybody. Proctor's sister posted about Colin, maybe favorite nephew, something like that. I don't know. Again, if that's all they can find in all the social media, these kind of loose little connections there. And from that, you want to say that he's best friends or very good friends. It just seems a little bit of a reach. Julio Suave, I don't think we'll ever know exactly what happened. I still think he may have been nailed by a plow. Yeah, that's possible, right? There wasn't a lot of snow, but it definitely was plowing. We know that for a fact. In Massachusetts, usually only a few inches they'll plow. So that could have created some of the injuries. Everyone was wasted, no clear minds there. I think you're talking about the people in the house and also Karen Read. Yeah, and that's the thing. Is like, so you're expecting some evil genius out of this, whether it's Karen Read or someone in the house, but they were all drunk, and it just seems very, very unusual. I want to mention here our upcoming projects. So we've got some more news on this. We'll be filming the first parts of our documentary series that focuses on the work of Dave McGrath and also on Melanie Perkins. And Dave is 100% will be with us. I'm pretty sure Melanie would be with us too. We'll be doing our first shoots on August 1st, and we have multiple people with us. So we're going to get this film from every angle, and it's going to be some incredibly, possibly dramatic moments, because this is really emotional stuff for these guys. We're going to be visiting some old crime scenes, and then we're going to get it all together, edited, and put it together on a trailer to try to make some to try to generate the funding that we need to do the full documentary series. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun. So if anybody's interested in joining us, that would be fantastic. We have someone here that's been with us for most of the shows, Benjamin John. I know he wants to participate, or said he has. I've given him my email several times. I think he said he's tried. I don't know. Somehow something's misconnecting here because I'm not getting the email. So I'll leave it again here. You know what? I love you guys, so I'll do more than that. I will leave my phone number. So please don't give it to any telemarketers. So there's my phone number if you want to call me, if you want to join us, if you want to, if you got a problem and you think I can help, I used to be a bartender. If you're looking for a good drink idea, go ahead, give me a call. I apologize for getting mad. I mean, I'm a good guy. I try to think about this stuff, and I'm okay with your thoughts on anything. And I'm okay, but it frustrates me when people just don't think for themselves, and then they get mad at me, or they get mad, or if I agree with 7 out of 10 things that Turtleboy says, but I question 2 of them and think one of them is wrong, then all his followers are going to rebel. That's a cult, dude. That's a cult. That's no longer cool, So, anyways, I like the Turtleboy Riders. I love Turtleboy's show. As soon as I get off this, I'll be there. I find it entertaining. I find it useful. And most of the people in this crowd are really entertaining and fun too. But if people are going to get upset about these things, yeah, that's a cult. You got to really start thinking about that. The whole problem you get into all of these cases is looking back over the history of crime, is buying into narratives without questioning things. This is that's what the police did wrong here. Even if you buy into the conspiracy theory, okay, and so some of the cops were aiding in this conspiracy, but multiple other layers of people, from cops to EMS people at the scene to the medical examiner, these people aren't all in the conspiracy. So what would happen in their case is they bought into the prevailing narrative that they were given, and they never questioned it. And that's what got them into trouble. That's probably the real reason why people like the Canton police and then the state police never investigated inside the house, because they bought into a narrative. That's why the medical examiner didn't really take a close look at those wounds, because they bought into a narrative. They're not all part of a conspiracy. Some might be, but not all of them. So you don't want to be like them. You don't want to make the mistake that they're making when they just hear a narrative and it sounds good and it makes sense and it fits and it seems to tie things, and that's it. So now you're never going to question anything else. That's not a good way to think, dudes. I'm sorry. If you're mad at me, you're mad at me. Hopefully you'll forgive me and come back, and we'll fight about it again. So, but I'm really looking forward to the documentary shoot. Tom, I want to give a shout out to some people. Tom Fleming is the leading the film crew, the production staff for that. But we now have several other experienced film people on board. And so we really have a big team going at this. So it's going to be very, very, I think we're going to produce something really good. And it'll just be the start. But anybody who the case is about, we're trying to track down, potentially this is as big as the stuff that was uncovered in the movie Spotlight and kind of similar to it. Dave and Melanie, who have researched this for years, Dave McGrath went in to pursue this to every lead and every angle. He's talked to hundreds and hundreds of people. And Melanie's been pursuing this case for decades. And they both independently have come up with the same conclusion, and that which is that the accomplices were working together on these predatory crimes in the 70s, and that they were protected by powerful institutions, and that they were connected to organized crime and the production of child porn. So a lot of this connects to current cases that we have. A lot of us have been interested in the Delphi case, and there's a lot of reason to think that that might be connected, that something similar might have been going on there. There might have been accomplices, and there might have been, I'm not saying the production of child porn, but similar. See, we're trying to create inappropriate material. Obviously, Abby and Libby were not involved with child porn, but they were kids. You could trick them into doing something like maybe raising their shirt or something like that. They're kids. They wouldn't know any better. But predators will take advantage of something like that. And we are seeing a lot of this pop up in a lot of cases. But we've talked about the Boardman case in Ohio, the Oakland County case, which is Detroit and Michigan. And this case that I want to talk about more at length than I was going to talk about tonight was the case in Boston, where maybe I'll talk about it a little bit now, but I wanted to go over the article. So there was, about a month ago, on a Saturday morning in the projects, the 911 call came in that there was a man lying on the floor that wasn't breathing. So the EMS were the first to arrive on the scene. Shortly after that, the fire department, and then shortly after that, the police. The EMS report has not officially been released, which is suspicious, but the firefighter report was written by a captain and released quickly. And in that report, it claims that the house was unsanitary, was filled with drug paraphernalia and sexual paraphernalia, that the 6 adults in the house they probably didn't know the political correct way to do this. They were 6 men dressed as women, is the way it was described. Certainly the victim on the floor, who was pronounced dead, was a man dressed as a woman. Now, people have complained. The main focus of the liberals on the Boston City Council and in the media was they didn't want to smear the transgender community. So they're complaining, the fire department misgendered this guy on the floor. But I think it's also possible the fire department was trying to protect the transgender community, because 4 children were found, small children. I think their age, youngest was 5. So I think they were between age 5 and 10, were found being hidden in a bedroom. What was going on there? Initially, nobody claimed to have been a parent. It looks bad. It looks very suspicious to some of the cases that we've uncovered and that Dave McGrath has reported on, going back to, for instance, the house in Revere, Massachusetts, that was busted. They had basically a boy brothel going on for many years, maybe as much as 15 years. People were flying from all over the country to go there. The New York Times reported on it. I think there were 24 indictments. And then a lot of it, was somewhat buried under the rug after that, because all the way back then in the late 70s, people were worried that they were smearing the gay community. So people went to bat for it. The prosecutor was voted out of office. The rest of the cases got dropped, and the media tried to write articles saying that this was all just overblown. I don't know. I mean, you got underage boys. There's no reason to suspect any of them were abducted, but there was a boy who went missing and was never seen again. His last name was Savoy. This was about a mile from that apartment. He was going out to shine shoes. That was a big thing back then. But he was going to a local racetrack where he used to shine the shoes. But before he got to the track, he dropped off his kit with a nearby restaurant owner that he must have been friendly with, and told the owner he was going off to the track. So if he was going to shine shoes at the track, well, he left behind his means of shining the shoes, his shine box. So then he was never seen again after that. He was wearing a shirt that said, "Try it, you'll like it." Now, that was from the commercial that was famous back then, and only old people like me and maybe Dave Jenkins would remember this, but this was the Life cereal commercial where it was with three little boys, and the smallest one was a fussy kid named Mikey, and they were trying to decide whether or not they liked Life cereal, and the only way they could see if it was good was to see if Mikey liked it because he was really fussy. So they got him to try it. So maybe that kid got that shirt from his mom. I didn't see anything reported of that being suspicious anywhere. But when I saw that, I thought, I wonder who gave him that shirt. And I wonder if he was being groomed. Now, the guys that would have been hanging out in that apartment, that was a boy brothel, and many of these people were highly connected, powerful people or very prominent people. One of them was the head of an elite boys' school. And there were other ones that were covered up. There was a very wealthy blue blood Harvard grad that lived in New York. A lot of prominent people. Well, a lot of those guys like to go and hang out at the track a mile away. And that's where he was on his way to. Who gave him that shirt? Did somebody say, hey, if you come back to this apartment, we'll give you $10, which would have been, you won't need your shine box. That's a lot. And all you got to do is take off your shirt. As a 10-year-old kid, he would have taken that. He would have jumped all over that. He had no idea. He had no suspicion of what kind of predators were out there. And then he was never seen again. Now, there's no proven link between him and that house. But to me, it would be an incredible, he went missing, I think it was a couple of years before that house was busted, but very much while that house was at the height of its activity. So to me, it seems very good chance that those cases are connected. So, back to this house, the situation in Boston, you got these 4 kids in there. Who do they belong to? How'd they get there? Is it being covered up? Yes, there's no question in my mind it's being covered up, but we don't know. But the reasons seems to be more because of ideology. And everything in the Boston Globe article today stank like freaking hell. So the fire department reported, that they couldn't revive him. The house was filthy. The house was full of drug paraphernalia. The men were uncooperative, all of them. And the kids were being hidden in the bedroom. Everything looks bad. Then the police swept in. And initially, the initial reports, they said almost nothing. They didn't even say who was there. And that's what happens when the police know maybe there's somebody prominent there, or something that they know their bosses are going to want to write the report. So, and I think that's what happened. So after the fire department report was written, a week later, a captain from the Boston police, a very progressive woman known in progressive circles, wrote her own report, and she basically called the fire department liars. Said the department was not unneat. There was no drug paraphernalia. There was no sexual paraphernalia. That the parents were all, or that the adults were all cooperative, and that several of them identified as being fathers to the boys, and the boys weren't being hidden. They were just taken into the back room so they wouldn't see the dead body on the floor. That part's at least plausible, but it's different from what the fire department was saying. Who's telling the truth? Well, I can think of no reason why the fire department would lie, but I can think of every reason why the police department is lying. And it's all, if I could go over the Boston Globe article for you, it's disgusting. All the city councilors were concerned about were protecting the reputation of, they didn't want anything that was going to harm the reputation of transgenders. That's their priority. They don't want the transgender community smeared. Now, those 4 kids were, even based on the police report, even though the police wouldn't say, and it confirmed out of the stuff, they were taken from the custody, and they were sent to child protective custody. I don't know where they are now. That's obviously not going to be reported, but they were taken away from, if there were parents there, they were taken away from. We don't even know if the children were living there. Everything is being hidden from us. Even the cause of death, the state says they haven't determined that yet. They haven't. Now, clearly, the guy died from a drug overdose. But the state wants to hide that for some reason. Well, I think you know why. Now, it's been a month. Is it really possible that a house with 4 very underage children in it and a lot of other suspicious stuff going on, and is it possible that they don't know the cause of death a month later? That's absurd. That's absurd. They clearly, they're trying to hide things. When I say a cover up, maybe they released this stuff so far down the road that they figure everybody's forgot. And it's their little ways of doing things, releasing things piecemeal. But the main thing is, what about the poor kids? What happened to them? What happens to other kids in that situation that might be being groomed, might be being abused. And I'm not saying this to be anti-transgender. I'm not. I don't care. I'm a libertarian. Live your life. Live your life the way you want to live it. As long as you're not harming anybody else, I could care less. The gym where I work out at, there's a transgender person there, and she is absolutely my favorite person there. She's the friendliest, the hardest working, the smartest. And she's also has biceps that would kick my ass, so I have to like her. But no, she's fantastic. I don't care if someone's transgender, but we have to look at things honestly and objectively. If you've got 6 guys dressed in drag and 4 children, underage children there, and drug use at 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning and sexual paraphernalia, someone has to be unafraid to ask real questions and not afraid that they're going to upset the transgender community. What's the truth there? They might not even have been transgender people. They might have been using that as a guise to do something more predatory. But nowadays, liberal prosecutors are going to be terrified into even looking into that. So they're going to not protect those 4 kids. These are the kind of people. I mean, Jeffrey Dahmer, there was a kid, a 13-year-old kid that had been drugged and a hole had been put in his head, and he escaped from the apartment. You've seen all this. It's famous. The police arrived, and by then Dahmer was there, and he said, "That's my boyfriend. He's 19." So the police took this 13-year-old boy, walked him back to the apartment with Dahmer, and left him there. And Dahmer finished the job. So is this what, is this what we're, now this, that was a different motivation there, but is this what we're doing here? Because we're afraid to offend a community, we no longer care about the safety of underage children? Is that what we're doing here? Yeah, it is what we're doing. And now I'm a libertarian. So when I criticize liberals, I'm a liberal, but I'm a liberal 1989 version. I believe in our rights. I believe we have to protect our rights. I believe also in a safety net. I do think we need a safety net to protect people. I'm not sure what the best solution is on healthcare and stuff like that, but I've always believed that you needed some kind of a safety net. I'm not a laissez-faire guy. I'm a conservative to a point, but you do need the government. There's a role for it. It's a vital role. And I think the main role of the government is to protect our rights and our rights to privacy. So I'm pretty much a liberal and all that stuff. Marry who you want. I don't give a shit. It's your business. Live your life. If you're not hurting somebody else and you're a good person, if you're a transgender person, like a transgender woman, a transgender man, rather. So someone that's born as a woman who now is transitioned to a man. If that person wants to use the same bathroom as me, I don't care. Not bothering me. Now, the other side, I do have a little bit of a concern, but it's nothing against transgender people. It's just more that I'm worried about the safety of girls that would go into a bathroom with men, people that were born men, whether they're men that are pretending to be trans or whatever. I don't need to investigate too deeply. I just know that there's a safety issue. So if you are a born man that is now transitioned to a woman, yes, maybe it's difficult for you to have to go into the men's room, but you ought to accept that for the safety of the girls. You ought to be willing to accept that discomfort. It sucks, but you have to accept it because the safety of kids and women is more important than all the other issues. The other issues matter, but that stuff is more important. And so the same thing in this case here. You got these 6 kids there. The most important thing is the safety issue. And you have to wonder if agencies, not just justice agencies, but other agencies fail to do their job because they're afraid of offending a certain community. That's a problem. That's a big problem to me. So I don't know. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about? We still actually have 13 people here. That's a pretty good number for this time of night, especially since some of the guys left that were mad and some of the guys left that were go over to Turtleboy, and I'll see them over there shortly. They're probably over there denouncing me right now. Oh, well, I can live with it. I like the guys that we do have here, the people that we do have here. people that are open to other ideas, that are realistic thinkers, that are willing to question things, willing to disagree with other people. Dave Jenkins has become one of my best friends, and I only know him through the Delphi murder case. That's initially he was commenting on my channel, but now I talk to him a couple times a week, and we disagree. Dave Jenkins thinks strongly, and he's followed the case longer than me, and he has all the data that Keegan Kline was involved. I don't, but we don't disrespect each other for it. We both respect each other's point of view on it, because neither one of us we're both aware of the evidence. We're trying to interpret evidence in a different way, and that's a challenge. And at the end of the day, that's why you have trials. Hopefully in a trial you find out what happened, but even then, not always. Sometimes things don't come out until years later. But we haven't even had a trial on any of this stuff yet, so we don't know. These investigations are ongoing and all of these things, so I don't know why anybody would rush to conclusions until all the evidence is in. And so I feel more confident over the last several months the way things have played out, but I won't be shocked if I find out that something totally different happened. And so Slatherings agrees with Dave, or they're basically on the same page, that there's a connection to between RA and KK through the Anthony Shots account. That's very plausible. I just, to me, I don't know. We haven't found it yet, but it's very plausible. I mean, because if there is no connection to Anthony Shots and Keegan Kline, then it really is definitely the mother of all coincidences on so many levels. So that's a difficult thing. But you know what? There's even Dave has to accept one coincidence. One very large coincidence is true in the Delphi case. I think you can challenge. Let me challenge you on this one, Dave. So Logan, what the hell is his name? Mr. Logan. Fuck, I forget his first name. I always go to say Logan Mankins, who used to play for the Patriots. I forget his first name. Ronald Logan. The FBI was sure that this guy did it because it was his property that the kids were found on. And while the girls were missing and while the search was underway, but before the bodies were found, Mr. Logan went about manufacturing a false alibi to say that he wasn't home, but it was false. He was home. And when the FBI found that out, they were like, that's our guy. And I think that to this day, I suspect that the state police in Indiana really have no use for the FBI because of that, because they feel like the FBI misled them. And because of that, not misled them, but developed tunnel vision on it. And because of that, didn't pursue other leads, including, for instance, the Keegan Kline lead. They interviewed him. And when because they already knew about the Anthony Shots connection. But when Keegan Kline and his father said they were in Vegas, apparently the FBI accepted that. They didn't look into it, which it wasn't true. They didn't leave until Vegas until a few days later, which makes the Klines even more suspicious. But the FBI dropped the ball on that because they were so sure that Ronald Logan was the killer. Now, Ronald Logan was a guy in his mid-70s. He died of natural health. So let's see. Do you agree? So Dave, do you agree that, Dave, let me ask you, do you think that Ron Logan was involved, or do you think that that's just a coincidence? And this gives me a time to have a drink because I am thirsty. And we're still holding strong at 13 viewers. So that's pretty good. I see 14 likes. So that's probably the 13 people that are here. If you haven't liked it, give me a like, give me a comment, join the conversation. Let's meet at the end of the bar for a drink. Nah, I'm too old. I can't do that. Sorry. I wish I could do that. But thank you for being here. Thanks for watching. So let's see. So what do you guys but Dave, do you think there will be a connection to Ron Logan? That's my question. Who the body, where the property of where the girls were found? Okay, so he says, I do not think that he was involved, but I have no good explanation for why he would do that. Yeah. All right. So you believe then, as do I, that the connection to Ronald Logan is a coincidence. So coincidences do happen. Yeah. So, I mean, that's the thing. Coincidences do happen in these cases. I mean, and you can see why. You can see why the FBI initially bought into that, because it obviously looks bad. The fact that the bodies were found there and he was making a false alibi. But people have there's always people have other reasons for doing things. People have other reasons for lying. People have other reasons for making false alibis. And in his case, there, he just didn't want the police nosing around his property. And so I guess I would say that's probably the main reason. But there may have been some other reason. Maybe, who knows? Maybe he had some other dead body in his basement. He didn't want the police bringing in dogs to sniff it. I mean, you just don't know. Why did the CIA lie as part of the war in certain aspects of the Warren Commission studying the death of JFK? Well, maybe they were involved in his murder, but more than likely it's because they didn't want the truth to come out about stuff related to Cuba, about, for instance, that they tried to kill Castro or that they tried to hire the mafia to kill Castro. So there are different reasons that people have for lying or for making false alibis. Let me look again. So, but it seemed like they knew they went to murder them. So if there was this excellent. Yeah, so I'm still reading. So is anybody else here? We're dropped down to 10. We're fading fast. So say goodbye. Come in and say something to us so we know you're here. That will be fantastic. So let me know. I'm curious to what you guys think. We don't have to go too specifically into the Karen Reed case, but let's just go into this general approach that I'm saying. Do you guys think it's a problem that people just accept a narrative and then they accept evidence that they think supports that narrative, but really should be looked at a little more skeptically? To me, I think it's a huge problem, and I've seen it popping up in all these cases. I've talked about some of them before. I saw it pop up in the Lizzie Borden case. It was one of the things that struck me the Lizzie Borden case was the first case that I looked to in depth, and as I'm reading, I could see this happening. It's people forming a narrative and buying into it, and ending up with false conclusions because of that. And this would happen. And then another book that I read after that was an in-depth book called The Man from the Train. It was about a series of axe murders that took place mostly around 1908, 1909, 1911. And many families were invaded by seemingly one axe murder, although there may have been some copycats in some of these cases. But people were falsely convicted, falsely charged on a regular basis because this guy would sweep into town and then sweep out. So they had no reason to suspect him. But you start looking at the local picture, and you start looking at who had the means, who had the motive. And then so when you're doing that and you're frustrated, a false narrative can easily develop, especially with the weird guy at the end of the street that doesn't really have an explanation for where he was. Aha, it must be him. And then when that happens in a big case like that, all of a sudden people start coming out of the woodwork saying, I think I remember him doing this, or I remember him doing this. And all of a sudden this huge case comes together. And then 3 years later, someone else confesses to the murder, or some evidence emerges to prove that was completely wrong. And sometimes the guy even has to get let out of jail. And this just that comes up in that case. It comes up in those cases all the time. And I think it's come up in almost every case I've ever looked at, or at least any of the famous cases, which obviously those are the ones that I'm mostly looking at. It just comes up so commonly that people buy into a narrative because it's comforting to have a narrative. We don't like the idea that somebody got murdered and we have no idea why. We don't understand them. It feels a lot better to understand them, to think we have a grip on the machine. Whatever it is in life. Why did Russia invade Ukraine? Well, it feels better to think you have an understanding of that. Why did Trump lose the election? Or why did this? Or why did that? Everybody wants to have an explanation for it. And so that's what the human brain does. It's a pattern recognizer, so it's looking for these kind of patterns. We're trying to find, looking at the Jeffrey Dahmer case, we're trying to find those kind of patterns. Dahmer stands out, at least in a lot of ways, maybe superficially, but there's a lot of things about Dahmer that were really different than others. Every serial killer has their own unique quirks and own unique traits. They don't all fit neatly into a box. But there are patterns that you can definitely recognize. And that's where profiling comes in. And Dahmer fits the pattern more than people think, I think. I don't personally think. See, the narrative that's out there, that's put out, I didn't watch the whole Netflix series. Maybe if you guys did, you could tell me. But I got the sense that they went with the narrative that has come down to us through conventional wisdom, that Dahmer was just a lonely guy that didn't know how to relate to people. And when he would get people into his house, he didn't intend to kill them, at least not the first several victims. And but he got upset when they wanted to leave because he didn't want to be left alone. So bam, he sprung on him. That's bullshit. Dahmer had a fascination with bones and dead animals going back to when he was a little boy. Now, his father encouraged it. His father was a chemist. He had a PhD, and his father just thought that little Jeffrey had an interest in science, and maybe he was going to be a future biologist. I don't blame the father for that. But no, Jeffrey was developing a fascination with this stuff. Now, to me, I think some fascination with the gross and the macabre, things like death and bugs and roadkill, guts, those are natural for boys. Yes, some tomboys, some girls too, but it's a boy thing. I can remember me and my friends when we were little kids, like 6, 7 years old, doing mad scientist experiments where we'd get a couple of bugs that we'd find. I don't even know what these bugs are, but big enough to, say like half the size of your thumb or something, and you'd cut the head off of one and transplant it to the other. Say a cricket and some kind of red bug or something, and see how long they'd live. It's gross. It's crazy. It's the stuff that boys do. You outgrow it. One of the reasons you outgrow it is you don't want to be cruel. And I think as a normal person, your concept of cruelty comes from empathy. It comes from starting to care for other people and other beings. You care for critters. So for a normal person, at some point you see a dead dog on the road or a dead cat, and you feel really bad. You might still have a little fascination with the guts or something, but you feel bad. And as you get older, you become more, you develop along the idea that it's wrong because it's cruel to be thinking about that stuff too much, and you outgrow it. But if you're a psychopath, you don't have that empathy. You're not aware of that you don't have it. It's just that you were born that way. And so you don't feel any revulsion to seeing a dead animal, and you don't feel any revulsion to killing an animal. And I'm not talking about hunting and killing something for meat and something maybe you're taught as a right to, on your way to manhood, you're taught that it's a natural thing to hunt, to kill, to eat meat. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about where you have you are titillated by seeing an animal killed, eventually by killing an animal yourself. So I think where Jeffrey Dahmer becomes who he was when these instincts or these fantasies that were maturing in him as he's 8, 9, 10 years old, then he hits puberty. So these things are still growing in him. These fantasies about death and the macabre and guts and bones, they're still developing in him, and they're unhindered by any kind of empathy. And then, bang, all of a sudden he's hit with hormones that have to do with sexuality and things that arouse you. In his case, he was homosexual, so about boys. But that stuff was all melded together, and he was aroused by death and the macabre, by bones, by dissection. Those things. We see a psychopath. Another physical characteristic is that their brains are naturally low in dopamine, and people that are low in dopamine can be depressed. This is probably why Dahmer became an alcoholic. You get that, but you get that stimulus, that arousal from things that might arouse normal people, but for them gives them an extra jolt. And then, so as a boy, he's getting an extra jolt from being aroused by the dead cat on the street. And then as he gets older, that's becoming mixed up with the other things that he's investigating. I'm sorry, with the other things he's experiencing in terms of his sexuality. And so eventually it all just kind of comes jumbled up in his head, and he never really finds a way to distinguish it. So when he first kills at 18, it's, he describes it initially, and he corrected this later, but people don't see this. But he says he never intended to kill the kid. He picked up a hitchhiker, brought him back to his house. He was by himself, and he just wanted company. They had some beers, but when the guy he picked up turns out was not homosexual, and when he decided he was ready to leave, Jeffrey Dahmer panicked and struck him on the back of the head when the guy went to walk away. Of course, that's bullshit. And in a later version, Dahmer pretty much admitted it by saying he struck him in the head while he was sitting in the chair. But the reality is I guarantee it, Jeffrey Dahmer, when he was cruising around, he was thinking about finding someone to get back to the house to kill. And that's not to say he would have gone through with it. Maybe you get a guy back to your house and you have second thoughts, maybe, but that's what was arousing him. Yes, he was also a necrophile, or he tried it once. He attempted to dig up a body. This was a young guy that he saw his picture in the newspaper, like an 18-year-old kid. At this point, I think Dahmer was in his 20s, and Dahmer had killed his first when he was 18, that he didn't kill again until he was 17. And in between there, I think it was in between there, that he read about this kid and he saw the picture and he was attracted to him and he wanted the dead body. So he attempted to dig it out, but the ground was partially frozen and he wasn't able to do it. So, but in terms of the other necrophilia stuff, he kept the bodies and he tried to preserve them. Didn't really know how to, but got better over time. Famously, we know eventually he ate slabs of meat, but he had a fascination with keeping the skeletons. He would paint them and enamel them. Once he figured out how to do this stuff, he'd kill a body and keep it in his room for days until it was drawing. In one case, he came in and found it covered in maggots. Now, I don't know if that's because he was on a drunken binge and just didn't get around to clean it up, but I think it's probably because he just didn't want to get rid of it. He liked having these dead bodies. Yes, Yes, Dave, he did. He tried to dig up a corpse, and that's according to his own testimony. Again, anything with his own testimony, you have to take with a grain of salt because he's trying to create an image that he wants people to buy into. But I don't know why he would make that up. But it's possible he would come up with a reason to make that up. So, but I just think that this guy, his fantasies weren't from day one. Were about control. The psychopath's fantasy are about control. They're about having a godlike control over another human being. When I look at Richard Allen, the way I imagine him doing this, he had it all worked up in his mind for years, probably looking at that bridge and thinking, wow, some kids one day are going to walk to the end of that and I'm going to trap them. And so that day, I believe when his daughter moved out of the house a couple months before, I believe he never killed before that. Now, obviously, we're all curious to see if we can find some evidence he did. The main reason is because he probably didn't have the opportunity. He's living at home with his daughter and his wife. And BTK wouldn't kill for long periods because he didn't have the opportunity. So he waited till he had opportunities. But I believe, and I think police profiled this, and I came up with this theory before they found Richard Allen, was that he was triggered. Dave, I respect Dave. He doesn't believe in the trigger theory. But I believe that he was triggered as a psychopath. He controlled his daughter. He felt like he had that control over her. Doesn't mean he abused her. He may have had psychological abuse, but BTK had a really good relationship with his oldest daughter. So in his way, he may have been perceived by his daughter as a good father. And I think initially his daughter was at court for all this stuff too. So she probably loves him or loved him. But I think he was a dominant presence in her life. Very dominant. He was probably the guy that was at every soccer game or whatever she did, whatever activity she did. He was always there because in his mind, he was the god and she was meant to worship him. So her leaving 2 months before to move out with another man because she got engaged, that would have triggered him. It would have made him feel betrayed. And in many ways, his whole world kind of crumbled, I think. And I think his fantasies really became accelerated at that point. And the fantasies would have been always there, but the braking system on him acting on it was his own image of himself as a good father. That's what I believe. And so I think that it's the image of himself as a good father and a good husband that kept him from killing. So that's why I don't think he killed before. But if you really want to look for evidence of a developing psychopath, in my opinion, the best way you might find it, now he got married young. He was married when he was 18. So I think possibly the best way to find it would be to find what he was up to. And there may be no way to find this, but in his early teen years, so when he was coming through adolescence, so when he was first going through puberty, so when he was 15, 16, 17 years old, did he kill animals? And it may never be evidence of that, but it's interesting how the person he ended up married, my understanding is, and you guys can correct me on this, is that she now owns an animal practice, or I think it was described as a veterinary clinic. She's not a vet though. So but I guess it's possible to own something like that and employ vets. I don't know. I don't know. But I've read that that's what she owns. She owns like an animal clinic. Be curious if a guy who was torturing and killing animals, which we don't know that, I'm speculating, if he was doing that when he was like 16, 17 years old, and he ends up with a woman who must be an animal lover, that would seem almost ironic. But it might also explain the connection too. Like, what if he was injuring the animals or killing them, but pretending he found them that way? And maybe that's how he made his initial connection with her. That's entirely crazy speculation. I don't expect that to come true. Don't blame it on the drinking. I haven't had time to drink much. I wish I had a little more time tomorrow. Let me take a big swig. Let me check the comments again and see. Just his wife is, she is a vet, Julio Swab. All right. So she actually went to veterinary school. Interesting. I didn't know that. But I wondered that. I did know she owned a veterinary clinic. So she's an extremely educated woman then. Well, very educated. You have to be pretty intelligent to get through vet school. So that would be, does it seem like a plausible connection to you guys if he was okay, he's not sure about that. Yeah, so all we know is that she owns a veterinary hospital clinic, something like that. So at the very least, her life is caring for animals and she loves animals. So do you guys think it's possible that could have been how they met? That he took an injured animal to somewhere she worked. Maybe she worked, like my niece, starting in like the 7th grade, worked at an animal clinic all the way up into like sophomore year in college, an animal shelter. Is it possible that this woman was working at something like that, and that's how they met? He brought in an animal that he had wounded intentionally. Because I don't know. I'm just, like I said, crazy speculation. Dave says, I don't think it's his first dance. I think there is violent crime in his past for which he was not charged. Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, it's really, really odd when someone kills for the first time at 47 years old. It's very odd. But again, you have to look at the reasons why. So look at, we don't always know the reasons why. Why did Jeffrey Dahmer kill at 18 and then not kill again until he was 27? Did he not have opportunities? I don't think that was the case, because so in his history, he went into the military actually a few weeks after his first kill when he was 18. He joined the Army. This is interesting too. So before he joined the Army, he was working at a delicatessen, slicing meat. Then he joined the Army, was stationed in Germany as a medic. And then his next job, when he got thrown out of the Army for being an alcoholic, he didn't want to go home and explain why he was thrown out. So he went briefly to Florida, was arrested there for, I don't know, drunken disorderly. I'm not sure if at some point he was also exposed himself, but I think that came later. I think it was just drunken disorderly at that point. And so then he moved in with his grandmother in Milwaukee, which is where he'd been born. His first killing was in Ohio. That's where his parents' house was. And so his first job in Milwaukee was as a phlebotomist. So he went from his first job was cutting meat. His second job was as a medic, also cutting meat, I guess. And then his third job was also cutting meat as a phlebotomist, at least injecting into the meat. So interesting. That stuff may not mean anything, but he was drawn to those kind of things. And but he stopped killing. He killed that one kid at 18. And why didn't he kill for another 9 years? It's, was it lack of, well, I mean, I don't think it was lack of opportunity, because eventually when he did start killing again, he was living with his grandmother. He brought the victims back to the house. I'm trying to remember if he killed anybody in the house. I know he attempted to kill one person in the house, but the grandmother heard something. His method was to drug somebody and then kill him. So I think the person, he had drugged someone in the house, but then didn't have time to kill him before the grandmother heard something. And so he ended up bringing the kid to the hospital, or the guy, I shouldn't say kid. He did go after underage sometimes. I don't remember in that case. He killed underage kids, but he also killed men that were in their 30s. So I don't think he was particular as long as they were over puberty. I think that's all he really is interested. I don't think he would have been interested in little children. Not for moral reasons, just it didn't intrigue him. But so why didn't he kill for 9 years? I think small batch of Four Roses. I don't know. I haven't had it. Open it now, brother. Bottle of small batch Four Roses. Is that small batch? That's a whiskey, I guess, right? I never heard of it, but I would open it. So why did he wait 9 years? Anybody have any theories? Anybody else here that's listening? There's 9 people listening, so that means there's some lurkers. Come in and talk to us. Say hi. Tell us what your theory is. So, I mean, because usually we think of as once, the conventional wisdom is that once a serial killer starts killing, he keeps killing, and that there's it's an accelerated process. And that's not really actually always true. There is some truth to it. And in Jeffrey Dahmer's case, once he did start killing again, and he eventually killed 17 people, but it was also it was accelerating. And in the last few weeks, I think he killed multiple people before he got caught, just in the last few weeks. But part of that too may have been just it starts accelerating when the world around you is crumbling, like you're maybe going to get caught soon. In his case, he knew he was evicted. And this ad's going here. I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying to turn this off. Hopefully that turns it off. I'm sorry. I didn't know there was ads showing here, guys. I apologize. So, it may be that he didn't have the opportunity, but I think there's other possible reasons too. There are self-image. And this is why I say in the case of Richard Allen, he may have had an image of himself as a good father. Things accelerated when his fantasy got out of control and his life was kind of crumbling. When you're an alcoholic too, like that, your life can be crumbling. You've been drinking, ever since he was like 13. He was getting evicted at that stage. But why did he actually fully wait all that time? He explains it. I'm not sure. I don't think the explanation is convincing, but this might shed a little light on him too. So he was in the library, in the Detroit Public Library, when somebody slipped him a note offering to give him oral sex. So it was someone that I guess recognized he was gay and slipped him a note. And Dahmer didn't take him up on it. So there's so much for the idea of him just not wanting to be alone. or maybe he just wasn't attracted to the guy. I don't know. But the note, according to Dama, that note triggered in him a desire to go out and find other men. So it was at that point that he started going to gay bars and bathhouses. But he also would pick up he would go to areas where there was gay men hung out on the street, prostitutes. He picked up male prostitutes, and he picked up guys at bars. A lot of them were guys that he said, "Hey, I'll give you, whatever, $50. Come back in my house and take some photos," that kind of thing. Or in some cases, they were just guys that he, I guess, managed to impress enough. Come back to my house and I'll perform for you or whatever. But he wasn't interested in somebody performing for him. He one of the strange quirks with Dahmer, though, too, is that, see, people like this. The serial killer likes this godlike control, and so when I look at someone like Bundy or Richard Allen, I think what he thinks about in his mind all the time beforehand, which gets the dopamine flooding, is the act of killing and the look on their face, the look of absolute terror that they have. That's arousing to them. And so I think that Richard Allen, his main objective was to kill those girls, and that's what aroused him. There may have been a sexual component, and as far as we know, at least one of the girls had her underwear taken. But that's secondary. There's always that secondary. A lot of times, like BTK would masturbate sometimes on the victims after he was done, and sometimes he didn't. But murder was the main thing. It's murder that arouses them. It's not because they're angry at the world or angry at those people. Not at all. It's simply murder arouses them. It's similar to sex for them. It brings that spike in dopamine that their brains utterly lack. The biggest spike comes from the before the murder, when they're stalking. That's actually when they get the biggest flood of dopamine. But then obviously it's fulfilled at the end. And then they get a rush of serotonin afterwards, which gives them that kind of calm, like people get after sex. And it's so. Why did Dahmer's case, he wanted his victims to be lifeless but not dead. He wanted them to be unconscious. That was the nature of his fantasy. And in fact, at one point, he stole a mannequin and brought the mannequin back to his grandmother's house and was kind of having sexual relations with the mannequin. And his grandmother found the mannequin and threw it out, and he was enraged. And that scene's covered in the Netflix series, but that's a real thing. That really happened. So why was he taking a mannequin? Well, you would think that maybe it's like a little kid with a doll that you have a relationship with the doll and you invent a personality for it, and so you're not, that dog is your friend. I mean, that doll is your friend. I guarantee that's not what was going on with Jeffrey Dahmer. He did not put a personality on that mannequin. He did not give it a voice, did not have conversations with it. I seriously doubt that. What he did is he lay with that thing, which he imagined in his mind was an unconscious person or a dead person. And that's what aroused him. It's odd, but it's how his particular fantasies, you got this storm going on in your brain of hormones when you're 14. In his case, you got these fantasies developing that started around bones and death, bigly about bones. He was always fascinated with bones. And then that starts merging with the sexual stuff. And while that's going on, eventually in his case, it came out with this attraction to someone being unconscious, and it's not that odd either when you think about a psychopath. A psychopath does not see other people in the world as people. And actually, because of that, he has trouble seeing himself as a person. A psychopath looks at people as though they're two-dimensional video game cutouts. That's how they look at them. That's how Brian Kohlberger exactly described it when he was 17 years old. But that's how they are, because when you can't feel any emotional empathy or any emotional connection to other human beings, it's hard to develop a sense of them as being other human beings. And when you don't have that sense of other, you also have trouble having a sense of yourself. Dahmer's IQ, I'm not sure. It doesn't seem like he was too bright, but he did well in school up until his senior year. Then I think the alcohol took over. But we're talking about grades. So in terms of standardized tests or IQ tests, I don't know of any that he took. So his father was a PhD. So I mean, my guess would be that Dahmer was probably average to slightly above average intelligence. I don't think there was any reason to think that he was much beyond that. There's certainly no evidence of it in his crimes. There's no evidence of it or in anything in his life, including his schoolwork. He flunked out of college quickly. Again, that doesn't mean anything because you're drinking and stuff like that, but still, there's no evidence that he did anything particularly intelligent. So I'd say average IQ would be my guess. And I think the reason that he waited to kill 9 years is complex. He may have had a little bit of, even though he had killed once, it's possible he had not really fully accepted that that's what he was going to be in life, was a serial killer. He fantasized about killing, but he may not have accepted that idea until at some point when he killed again, and then he just was like, fuck it, these are my fantasies. And that's what took over. So I don't know. And you might have some other theories as to why he waited 9 years, because it doesn't seem like it was lack of opportunity. Although he was living with his grandmother. So it's possible that if he was living on his own sooner, maybe he would have acted sooner. So let's see. I was curious if maybe they've done that. The only thing that I know that they tested him for, Dave, is they did give him the psychopathy test. It's just a questionnaire multiple times. And he actually tested. It's like the test is kind of develop it's kind of like a spectrum test. So you rank, 1 through 36. And if you're above 28, you're a psychopath. I forget what the test is called, and I forget the exact number scale, but it's that kind of idea. And so he scored just below psychopathy. But does that mean he wasn't a psychopath? No, because you don't know what he's and there's no reason for him to answer honestly on those questions. So I don't know. Let's see. Didn't he run into the cops a couple of times and they let him go? He ran into him once, and he had a little boy. He had a 13-year-old boy with him, and the boy, he had already drilled a hole into the boy's head and drugged him. So the boy was confused. He told the cops, and actually the boy was there was some prostitutes on the street, I think, that knew the boy, and they were trying to protect him, and they were trying to tell the cops that there's something wrong here. Dahmer showed up, and they were trying to protect him from Dahmer. They knew something was wrong, but the cops didn't buy it, and they basically told the prostitutes to bug off. Dahmer told the cops that the kid was 19 and that it was a gay thing. And now the cops didn't just immediately turn him over. They did investigate it. They went back to his apartment and looked around the apartment. At the time, Dahmer had a rotten corpse on the floor in his bedroom, I think on the other side of his bed. Somehow the cops didn't smell it. Didn't see it. They looked in the bedroom too, but they just didn't look very thoroughly, and they didn't see it. So he really should have been caught there. So they took Dahmer's word that the kid was 19, it was a boyfriend. They left the kid with Dahmer, and Dahmer, as soon as the police left, finished the job. He killed him. So it's one of the horrible parts of this case. And again, it goes back to, were the police just sloppy? Maybe. But you can't help asking that the way Dahmer would protect himself was by saying this was a gay thing. And then were the cops afraid to offend that? So they were kind of politically correct, similar to the case in Boston going on now. I'm not anti-gay. I don't care what somebody does in the privacy of their bedroom. But I think sometimes if you're worried about something like, so for instance, you may have, no, I'm not even going to go there. So I'm just going to say, let's just say for political correct reasons, they may have been afraid to question him. And then in the Netflix scene, when he finally is caught, and I'm not sure if this is how it went down, but probably it was, again, somebody else was outside who had been wounded and who had handcuffs on. And Dahmer tried to say it was a gay thing. So the cops went back to the apartment and they looked around And in the Netflix scene, they go into the bedroom and they open up a drawer and they find a stack of Polaroids and they pull it out. And there's all kinds of pictures of bodies in various kinds of decay and decapitation and skinning and whatever. And that's when the cops arrested him. But even when he first is looking at those pictures in the Netflix scene, Dahmer says, "Oh, don't worry about those. It's just a gay thing." Well, to me, it sounds to me like, again, that's just a Netflix thing, but it sounds like he had said that before and it had worked. So I think he used that as a way of getting away with some shit. Possible. So, boy, we're running on 2 hours here, and I'm really thirsty, and my back gets sore sitting in this stuff like this. So we still have 9 people here. I don't, if one other person besides Dave and Slatherings, who I love like brothers, if one other person can just say, "Hi, I'm here," then we'll stick out for a few minutes more. So I don't know if people, I don't know how the numbers can be 9 still, and people are just watching quietly. But is there anything else that you guys want to talk about? Are we back? All right. I don't know when. I think I stepped on. For anybody that's still here, I think I stepped on the cable. Sorry about that, guys. So, all right, cool. So, what are you guys doing? Is anybody drinking? Dave is drinking whiskey. Slatherings. Not sure if Slatherings is drinking. Anything else interesting that you guys want to talk about? We've dropped down to 8 people, so we're finally scaring people off. Does anybody else want to jump in and give us any input? Some people are lurkers. I don't really tell my family much about the show, but I never know if there's like a family member in there just laughing their ass off at me. Slathering is doing some edibles. My friend Tom is a big fan of those. Is the audio back, Julio? I think the audio's okay, right? Let me check again. You got to be careful with these cords. Oh, it seems to be good. So, are people? Has anybody checked in the Turtleboy? I'll go watch it on replay after. Is anybody attacking me over there saying that Turtleboy dared to question some things? I don't know. We'll see. You guys taking any vacations? I went to the Cape, and I'll be going back to the Cape after. So me and Tom and a bunch of people will be doing the shoot with Dave McGrath and a few other people. And we're going to have a lot of fun. And then afterwards, some of us are going to go to the Cape, have a few beers, and go over the footage. So I want to give us a shout out to some people, too. Obviously, to you guys, Julio and Dave, as always, Slatherings. You guys have been great. There's also someone named, I'm just going to say her name is Joyce. I'm not going to say her last name. She's kind of part of our team, and she's a great person. And her daughter is 14 and has had some health problems lately. And so our thoughts and prayers are with her. Hopefully those will get resolved. But right now they're semi-serious things, and hopefully they'll be okay. Also want to always give a shout out to Dave McGrath because he got stitches on his head in the line of duty today or last night. Something with an arrest, I'm assuming, and must have been I've been involved with a lot of these arrests in my time at the bar, where you wrestle a guy to the ground on the concrete, and it can be tough. And I don't know how you guys that are cops, uh, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how it's so hard to get somebody handcuffed. I've helped a few times. I have no training. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But boy, that's hard to do. If someone doesn't want to be handcuffed, it's freaking hard to do. So I don't know how you do it. Let's see, who else do we want to give a shout out to? I think that was it as far as like injuries and stuff like that. So we're going to be filming on the first location will be in Lawrence. And I don't say that too early in the conversation, because at this point, it's generally the people that are close to us that are still talking. But this is a really important shoot for me personally, but also for Dave and for Melanie. We'll be looking at the disappearance of a kid named Andy Puglisi, who went missing in 1976. He was the same age as me. This was about a mile and a half from where I lived when he went missing. It was a big deal. I remember it at the time. It was a very big deal. And they never found him. It's never been solved. No one's been charged. Melanie took up the cause again. Now, Melanie was a personal friend of his, kind of a childhood sweetheart. She lived next to him in the projects. And Melanie took up the investigation years later, when she was about 30. Now, Melanie went on to study broadcasting and film and stuff like that. And she had been on a part of several series, such as The American Experience, Nova, things like that. And when she felt she had enough experience, she couldn't forget her friend. And she went back and basically reopened that case by herself, even though she's not in law enforcement. I don't really know her personally other than talking to her on the phone. We're going to be meeting her soon. You can tell when you watch her documentary, Have You Seen Andy?, that she's the kind of person that's going to be hard to say no to. And that's what served her well in that investigation. She seems like a very determined, feisty person. And people from Lawrence, especially people that grew up in the projects, are tough. It's not easy to slam a door or slam the bureaucracy in her face. She's going to fight back. And she did. And she uncovered a lot of things that were in her documentary. Now, I know for a fact that since then, she's uncovered a lot of other things. Oh, Dave, you've seen that. Okay, good. She's uncovered a lot of other new evidence. I don't know what parts of it she's going to talk about with us. I'm not 100% certain yet that she'll be with us on August 1st, but I've told her about it, and she said she's very interested. She's going to talk to me when she gets back from vacation. So I think if her schedule allows, she'll be there with us. And it'll be an emotional time, because I'm going to guess that she has not been back to the scene of the crime and of the main component of her documentary. In her documentary, so Andy was taken from a public pool and brought into the woods behind the pool. It's not far from the pool, but it is a very secluded area. I've been down there. For the first time I went down was a few months ago. And even though it's so close to the pool and to other parts of civilization, it's surrounded by tallish hills. And as a result, it really is secluded. You can't really hear or see the pool. There's a major highway right there. And you can kind of look up and see the cars. It's 495, a 3-lane highway. You can see them, you can hear them. Other than that, it's a really peaceful, secluded place. And that's where no doubt where Andy was taken, whether it was by one man or by multiple accomplices working together. So Melanie had a team of state police dogs. And it took you got to really, to pull that off as a journalist, to get a team of dogs down there to investigate they don't have that kind of time and resources. So she really has a way about getting things done. So she did a fantastic job to get that down there. And they found, so these are cadaver dogs, and they can smell any signs of human remains, even that are very, very old. And they both turned up on 2 separate searches at a certain tree. And apparently What happens is if a body dies near a tree, the roots absorb the decomposition up into it, and it becomes something the dogs can sniff out many, many years later. So they found that. So they decided that tree was an interesting spot, and they decided to excavate at the tree. And so I'm not sure how they got excavation equipment down there, or if they maybe they dug with shovels, but that must have been tough because that was an area. It's a jungle kind of area covered in roots. But they probably because they marked it out ahead of time. But it looks like a perfect square. You can see it in the video. Well, when I was down there a few months ago, it's still there. They never filled it in, and so it's kind of eerie looking at it. It's overgrown with moss, but it's still the same thing, and it's still next to that same tree that the dogs picked up a scent in. So we're gonna go back there, and I don't think Melanie's been back since then. So I'm sure it's gonna stir up a lot of raw emotions. This is an area that her friend was disappeared from and was never seen again, and was presumably murdered somewhere in that area. It's also an emotional spot for Dave McGrath, who visited there, and I'll let him tell that story. He has his own reasons, but he spent time down there too. So we're gonna visit that. We're gonna visit some locations connected to that case around there, and then after that, we're gonna drive all the way out to the town of Bridgewater, which is across our state, but our state's not too big, so I think it's about a 2-hour drive. Oh, we're down to 5 people. We're fading out. So we're going to go visit Bridgewater State Hospital, which is where the asylum was and still is. They do have other types of criminals there, but it's where they have a unit for the sexually dangerous. So this is where where they put the monsters. And Dave has a very compelling personal story. One of the more compelling stories I've ever heard. So we're going to have him tell that story at the location where some of his experiences took place. You're going to find it very, very interesting. Now, this material we're going to put together for a trailer, but it's also going to be in the series later on. So probably a lot of it will be in episode 1. So I'm not sure where Slatherings lives. I wish Dave could be there with us, but he lives in Ohio. So unfortunately, we can't afford to fly him out for the investigation. Maybe down the road, we can do something like that. We could who knows, Dave. Oh, Slatherings is in Ohio too. And that's a big state. So one of the interesting things also Dave does is he has a hobby. He does metal detection. So that's I don't know. Could that possibly be could that be useful if you're searching a crime scene, like in the woods? Maybe, I don't know. Like if you're looking for a shoe buckle, right, or a zipper. But I'm not saying we're doing anything like that, and we don't know where the investigation is going to go. And really, my series is, I don't even want to call it an investigation yet. We'll do investigative stuff if that becomes appropriate. But really, the 2 investigators on their own are Dave McGrath and Melanie Perkins. Now, hopefully, they'll kind of take us on board and let us help them, but that's up to them. They have, when you're an investigator, you have to do things your own way, and it's worked for both of them. So I wouldn't want to tell them not to. But hopefully, if we can get them to work together, we'll help them if there's some investigation that they need help with. But we're hoping that we'll get this kind of information out there because that leads to tips. And that's how Melanie got a lot of tips. She got a lot of media about this in the early years, got stories done in the paper local paper that she was working on this. And she set up a PO box, and it's still there to this day. Tips would come in. Then she did the documentary. More tips came in. Oh, we're up to 7 people. And we're back up. We're climbing back up to escape velocity before we drop into the ocean again. So anyways, so I think potentially if we can really do a good job with this series and get it out there, it can only lead to more tips and more exposure for this stuff. But the other thing is that we think that this possibly is the tip of a big iceberg. And so we'll see how far it goes. And I know part of it too is a possible connection to organized crime. And I wasn't initially deterred by that, although I was deterred when I heard that Melanie was nervous about it. And then when Dave told me some of the specifics, I'm not afraid myself, but you start to think about your family and stuff. So, but for now, we're going forward, and we're just try to go through things fearlessly, and hopefully we'll get to the truth. Hopefully we'll get to some version of the truth. I'm not saying I expect that we'll solve a case. I mean, that would be obviously the ideal. But I think just uncovering new evidence that would show that some of these guys worked as accomplices, or that there was a connection to the development of CSAM involving organized crime, that could lead to important discoveries, not just for our series, but if you get that serious enough, then maybe somebody bigger, like the Boston Globe Spotlight team, could take this on. And with their resources, maybe they could take it to the next level and get more done. And I think that maybe that's ultimately what Melanie and Dave want. I know, I haven't talked to Melanie as much, but I've talked to Dave a lot, and he just wants the truth to come out. He is an author. He's selling books, so that's great. But he has no shortage of topics that he can do books on. Well, in these cases, he wants the truth to come out. He wants justice to be served. If possible, if we can take some of these monsters off the street. Now, the monsters connected to these specific cases, most of them are dead. But if they were working together, then there are probably people they mentored that are still out there doing this stuff. And those are monsters we could stop, because there's no question the monsters are still out there. Nobody should question that. And as we see, and again, this goes back to the Boston case too, there's no question that at different times, powerful institutions, and not just the Catholic Church, protect and enable monsters. In the Boston case is because they have an ideology and they don't want to hurt. It's more important to them to protect the class of people who they have chosen to be. It's kind of what unites them. They are the noble saviors of this group of people. And in this case, and over the last 5 years, it's transgender people. And again, I'm not against transgender people. I'm just saying, but this is something that these guys, that if you're very far ideologically to the left, you will sacrifice the welfare and the safety of children on the altar of that ideology. I'm sorry, that's awful to say. I just don't doubt it. And you see the evidence. And is it is it something they consciously do? No, probably not. It's more a cognitive dissonance kind of thing, where you're not letting yourself see the important things. I mean, anybody looking at that case in Boston would say the most important thing is the safety of those 4 children. But if you're a hard left progressive, and I'm progressive in many ways too, but if you're progressive like the true progressives nowadays, where ideology is everything, you're not going to, your most important fear is that someone in that community is going to be smeared. The other issue, we always have to talk honestly about these things, is grooming. Grooming is a real thing. They don't want to talk about it because when it comes to grooming, they're worried that people on the right will use that to smear the entire class of gay people or transgender people. To some degree, that's a legitimate fear. Okay, just because there is some level of grooming that goes on doesn't mean that people support predatory behavior. But if your goal is to make people more accepting of any type of sexual lifestyle, part of your goal in that, when you do that, is to expose children at the earliest possible age to that type of activity. And yes, that is going into books that are put into schools for elementary children, as low as first grade. It's a fact. ABC News doesn't want to tell you that. Channel 5 doesn't want to tell you that. The New York Times doesn't want to tell you that. CNN doesn't want to tell you that. They want to falsely argue that that's not true. It's true. It's documented. It goes on. There are books that go into these schools that are designed to make you accepting of any lifestyle or any sexuality. And in order to do that, they try to make you. So I'm just come out and say it. One of the books is they talk about one boy giving another boy a blowjob. I've seen the chapters from it. Now, look, that book might be completely appropriate. Am I rambling? Sorry, Julio. I'm all right. What I'm talking about, Julio, is this. Grooming is when you try to make everybody accepting of every sexual lifestyle. Now, again, to repeat, I myself am accepting of anybody's sexual lifestyle as long as it doesn't hurt somebody else. Okay, so what you do, what anybody does behind closed doors is their business. And so people can marry who they want. I don't care. They can take whatever gender they want. I don't care. That's their business. I support them. I don't love them any less. I don't care. It's none of my business. But as part of the agenda to try to make people more comfortable with that, they groom. And what grooming means is you try to get those kids as early as possible, all the way down to kindergarten, exposed to those concepts. And they get it into books. And those books are being pushed into these into kids' libraries. Now, those books are appropriate for libraries, just not little kids' libraries. Kids should be, it should only be when kids are old enough to make their own decisions on those kind of things. And that, to me, parents have a right to take those books out. And and this is what goes on here is, people are so afraid of questioning a certain lifestyle that they won't cover a case honestly, like the 4 kids in Boston. That's all I'm saying, Julio. I hope that sounds acceptable. Well, mostly I hope I've accurately portrayed my position. If you're still here. So I am not at all questioning anybody's lifestyle. Never have, don't care. Roommate of mine in college, one of my best friends, we didn't know at the time, but he came out right after that as gay. I didn't think any less of him. And that was in the 80s. So I didn't have to be groomed to accept it. I mean, if you care about someone, they're a good person, that's all that really matters. What the other stuff, you're born the way you're born. And it doesn't really matter to me. As long as you're not hurting other people, who cares, So, but when people won't cover things honestly, and police won't look into things honestly because they're afraid to hurt a certain community. I think maybe that happened in the Dahmer case when they sent that 13-year-old kid back. Dahmer said, oh, it's a gay thing. And police were afraid to offend that. So they sent an innocent 13-year-old boy to his death. So does that make sense, Julio? So it doesn't have any relevance to the Karen Reed case. Doesn't have any relevance to. Okay, I wish I could get you on the mic, Julio, so maybe you can explain it better. Grooming is, my understanding, there are different ways you can use it and mean it in its terms. But for me, one level of grooming is when you're trying to make people accepting of a certain lifestyle by exposing them to them. It's not indoctrination, because I think indoctrination is more political. This is not political. And I think even some level of grooming is understandable. So, for instance, if you're a heterosexual male or female, but especially males, and you've never seen 2 guys kiss, and then all of a sudden you see that, if it's the first time you've seen it and you're 22 years old, you might have a bad reaction to it. Even if intellectually you say, it's nobody's business. So I think the positive part of grooming is what they would say is, if you expose kids younger to it, just like when they would see a male and a woman kiss, they should have no problem seeing 2 guys kiss. And they're probably being fair on that. I mean, I think there's probably a level of grooming that is not a bad thing. So but what I'm saying is the worry about offending the community when it goes so far that you don't protect children. That's a problem. And grooming is also what goes on. For instance, looking back at the case in Revere that I talked about, the boy brothel. When you take 10-year-old, so what would happen? One of the ways they started recruiting boys. There was a bus driver in Boston who was friendly with the kids, and he started grooming them. This was in the 70s, and they did call it that back then too. And so what he would do was, he'd stop being friendly with the kids. With the kids that were like 16 or 17, he'd say, hey, I know a place that if you go back there, they'll give you beers and weed and get kids back to this house. But eventually he'd say, hey, I know a place where if you go back, he'd tell this to 10-year-old boys, 6-year-old boys even say, hey, you go back to this house, here's the address, and just tell them why you're there. And all you have to do is take your shirt off and they'll give you $10. That's grooming. You're starting to bring a guy in to something where it's a predatory behavior where you're trying to get kids accepting of something and reel them in. And then eventually, once you got them trusting you, you take it to some place that is much more criminal. Yes, so I mean, Julio, do you feel like what I said is either wrong or offensive? Because I don't mean it to be, but I also want to deal with things honestly. So Julio Suave says grooming has been a term to describe the behavior of sexual abuser, basically preparing his victim for abuse. Yes, absolutely, that's a form of grooming too, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. So you're talking about grooming where it's someone that's already in your life, a family member or something like that. But I'm also talking about somebody that is off the street and you're trying to make a connection and say, hey, come on in here, it'll be all right. You're winning their trust over, and kids are vulnerable like that. And that is also a type of grooming. I don't know if you don't. I mean, maybe there's a better word we can try to find, because I definitely don't want it to be offensive. And I think it's a word that has a lot of uses. Like I said, in some cases, it can be reasonable and positive to try to get kids some exposure to different lifestyles so that they're not, you don't want kids beating up other kids or bullying them in high school. I mean, that's an awful thing, and that is something that has to be dealt with. And so maybe some level of, I don't know what the right word is. That's why I go with grooming. It's not really indoctrination because it's not a political thing. It's not an ideological thing. So Julio says, I'm using it too broadly, but I've worded with sexually abused and sexually abused. Okay, that's fair enough. Well, you know what? See, I do listen to people, and I'm going to take Julio's advice and try to find a better way to say it. And it's a really difficult concept to explain, because you don't want to smear people that are doing something that is actually positive. So, for instance, people that are just trying to give people a healthy exposure to another lifestyle that is not hurting anybody. And so in that case, it serves a healthy purpose. And I'm not sure what maybe exposure, would that be just a good word? Julio, I'm glad you had a couple beers. I'm trying to get through mine, but I've been talking too much. That's why I wish I had a co-host on me. But no, I'm not mad at all, brother, because people should be not afraid to criticize me or Turtle or anyone's, Oh, Dave, good night, man. I just saw that. I'll talk to you soon, buddy. So I'll get off soon too. We have 6 people on here, but I just want to make sure Julio's satisfied with my answer, that it wasn't offensive and that I can do better with it. Yeah, but it's okay. Like I said, you push back on it. That's why I try to read the chat. And I mean, ideally, this would be like we're all sitting around a bar and we're talking, and instead of me talking all this time, see, in that situation, I'm listening 80% of the time. I'm not doing so much talking. I'm usually pretty quiet. I'm talking here because I'm the only one that has the mic, so I have to do the talking when I'd really rather be taking a drink. But But that's how it should be. You should be pushing back. These are difficult things to talk about, and I'm going to get things wrong, or sometimes I could do things better. And so, yeah, I want to. Drunk texting is not new. Damn, drunk texting is as old as texting. So I'm drinking this thing called Truly Wild Berry. It's the first time that I've had it. It's now warm because it's in my hand and it's only half done. So when I get off this shortly, I'm going to watch the end of Turtleboy and take some more. So and drink some more. So the rest of us, probably all the Turtleboy people are gone because they're in Turtleboy. He's on live now. But we saw one of the guys in there, 7-pounder. I mean, he's a good dude. I think I don't know him personally. He comes on the channel. He's always been a good guy in here, smart comments, friendly guy. I'm 7-pounder. I don't even know if it's a guy. I'm assuming. I mean, that could be anything. But he got very upset with me today because I questioned a few things the Turtle has concluded on the Karen Reed case. And Jesus, don't get upset. People have the right to push on things. And I would like to see people go into his podcast and push back a little bit. I think he'd like it. Turtleboy, I think he'd like it. If you're going to run a podcast or a YouTube show, it should be interaction. It shouldn't be somebody just preaching to everybody else. I mean, or bullying other people into thinking that they have to think something. So, for me, what was that? Just felt something go by me. For me, so push back on me. If I say something to you guys, you think it's wrong, push back, please. If I ever gives a fact that is wrong, push back. If I don't use the best language like in this, or if I say something that's offensive, I mean, I'm not meaning to, but I might. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time. Shit. I think anybody that speaks on a subject is going to say something like that. So, yeah, TB is the reason everyone should have an anonymous account. I know. So many of the things that I've signed in for my life, I put either my email or my actual name because I never think to do that. I think he goes too far, but I enjoy his show. I think it's entertaining, but I do think it's essential. He's breaking out a lot of new stories that if he wouldn't cover them, they either wouldn't be covered or they wouldn't get. Like if I don't have enough exposure on my channel, so if I covered it, they're not gonna. Most people wouldn't know. So yeah, exactly. He gets the stuff out there that no one else is going to get out there. So. I wish Turtleboy would listen to my show more. He came on here once, but I was saying for weeks that the only reason the Canton police picked up blood at the scene was because they thought it was someone else's. And so then last week I'm watching his show. He's doing an interview with a former cop. Yeah, and the cop said started out by saying the exact same thing I've been saying, and Turtleboy was impressed by it, and I could tell it was the first time he was hearing it. I was like thinking to myself, dude, check out my little channel. I've been saying that for weeks, but I totally support what Turtleboy is doing. Yeah, he's a Mass local guy. I'm from Massachusetts too. I don't want to. I haven't been doing more cases on the frame case. I want to go back to doing more cases that have wider appeal nationally. So we don't just be known as a Massachusetts channel here. So that's why I'm doing Dahmer, and I'm going to do more of that stuff. But of course, the big documentary that we're working on is focused largely in Massachusetts, but Dave McGrath went out to investigate cases in a lot of other areas, Florida, but also particularly Michigan and Ohio. Probably a lot of other ones. Those are just the ones that I can think of off the top of my head. So those were areas that we would love to get out there and look at some of those cases. We'll have to raise a lot of money for that to be possible, for us to be able to fly people out and put them up in hotels. I don't expect us to be. Maybe if I win that $600 million jackpot tonight. Did you guys play? It's like $600 million jackpot for the Powerball. And I never have any luck. So I get that thing. If I get one number, I'm always like, I don't win anything, but it means I'm having a good day. Like, woo, I got one number. I've never had any luck with gambling, that kind of thing. But we bounced up to 8 people again. But that usually means someone from the channel pops on and they see They get a notification that it's live, so they pop in and they see if we're talking about anything that they might be interested in. And if we're not, they bounce out. Or if they see I have the glasses off and they go, ew, and they get out, that kind of thing. But I'm happy to see everybody anyways. They give us a chance. For those of you who just popped in, we've been talking about the Karen Reed case, which is in Massachusetts, possibly a huge, potentially one of the largest cover-ups in history, if it turns out to be that way, of a crime. It's a case where a Boston cop was found dead on a snowy night on the front lawn of another Boston cop where there had been a party the night before. The person who's charged with the murder is the cop's girlfriend who dropped him off at the house. And, we're up to 9 people. We're going up again. So the state has charged her. They said that she did it backing out and accidentally hit him and then left the scene of the accident. But much of the evidence just doesn't make sense for any of that. So the defense's theory is that he got out of the car and went into the house, and someone inside the house killed him, possibly in a fight or something like that, because there were a lot of guys that like to fight inside the house. And then rather than call an ambulance and try to have him saved, because it sounds like maybe he could have been saved if they got him to an ambulance, they either thought he was dead or just allowed him to die and then covered it up. But to make this happen, they had to get cooperation from, at the very least, the state police and possibly also the local police, maybe even the medical examiner, and even at some level now the prosecution, because there's no question whatever happened here, the prosecution is acting strangely, seemingly unethically, withholding evidence for over a year, vital evidence that would be normal, that you'd come up with, like the black box for the car. They didn't produce that for 16 or 17 months, and they still have not made it, as far as I know, available for the defense to look at. That thing should be, you get the data from a black box in days, really hours if you want. I mean, I looked it up, and every major police organization has a device. It's a $20,000 device, and the black box is set behind the steering wheel, and you take it out, you plug it in, you read the data. So there's no reason for that to take 16, 17 months. In fact, even in any car that's not like 10 years old or older, it has the black box in it, and it'll record anytime there's a collision over 5 miles an hour. So if they're going to accuse her of hitting him hard enough to kill him and break his skull, break her taillight, which is what they are, then clearly there'd be evidence on the black box. They're now saying that there is evidence on the black box, but it strangely took 16 months, and they don't seem to have shared it still. So it's very, very odd. And that's just one example. There's so many other examples here. They took forever to get the phone data, over a year. They had to be ordered by the judge. They still have not got the clothing of the victim, or even any information on that. DNA swabs from the body, from the wounds. None of that has been given to the defense yet. Just a long list of very strange things and strange claims that they've made. There were some really odd aspects of the investigation that at the very least look like a very poorly run investigation. And by very experienced people. The guy, the main cop running it, Michael Proctor, is a lead investigator on multiple big cases in Massachusetts right now and before that too. So it's hard to understand why there would be such an oddly run, oddly deficient investigation, unless that's standard when there's a cop involved and you don't want to point the finger at the cop. So you just deliberately run a shoddy investigation. Is that all it is? Is there a passive kind of conspiracy there where you're not deliberately fudging any evidence, but you're doing a lot of looking the other way? And Turtleboy seems more suspicious that he actually planted evidence. That's a hard thing to accuse a cop to do. There doesn't seem to be any motive for a state cop to do that, to not only blow his career, but if you get convicted of that, you're going to jail for a very long time. And other guilty people who are in jail because of your work are probably going to get let out, because now all of a sudden your evidence becomes tainted and your word becomes, unreliable. So that's a big case. We've gone over the one in Boston where 4 young boys were found in a house with 6 transgender men who seemed to be having on a Saturday morning, a drug-fueled and sex toy-fueled party, and one of the men seems to have died from a drug overdose. They looks like they maybe tried to hit the boys. The boys were eventually taken into state custody, but then the police also seem to be trying to cover this up because they don't want to harm the reputation of the transgender or the gay community. I say gay community because this all came during Pride Week, or is it Pride Month? I forget. But anyways, it came during the Pride time, and so they really you look at the comments by the city councilors, that's clearly their biggest concern. They, they don't really seem to care about the 4 kids, whether there was abuse going on, whether there was some kind of a sex ring going on. I'm not saying there was, but there's enough reason to be suspicious here that these 4 boys were being sexually abused, and they may not have even belonged to those 6 men. Are they going to cover this up just to protect the name of the transgender community? Yes, they are. Yes, they will. I hate to say it, but that's how the far left progressives do think now. I'm sorry. I'm fairly liberal myself, but that's how a modern progressive thinks. They don't care about facts, and they don't really care about the safety of kids. They do a little bit, but that comes below their cherished ideology. Their ideology is everything. That's all they care about. So we glance again. Reconstruction reports from state police take months or longer. There may be a preliminary report, but the final report can take a year or longer. Meant to mention that. Very good point, Julio. And I don't know. Again, I am just an old bartender who talks on YouTube. So I rely on you guys to give me information. I do my best to research it, but not being a cop, I don't know that. It seems to me that an accident reconstruction scene on something of that level of prominence, where they're going to charge somebody with second-degree murder, they must have had, like you said, a preliminary report. But is that something that is not going to be available to the defense? Is it because that preliminary report doesn't make sense? I think so, because I think that every explanation that we've so far seen from the prosecution does not make sense. That doesn't mean that she didn't do it, because as far as I'm concerned, the explanations that are coming from the defense don't make sense either. So something doesn't make sense, but yet the guy is dead. So something happened. And so we're going to have to try to really piece together some difficult things. Julio said, I think that it's called the CARS report, CARS. So probably CA something reconstruction scene. So car accident reconstruction scene. Is that probably it? Did I figure out that little puzzle? A couple more beers, I probably wouldn't be able to figure that out. But I think that's probably it. Car accident reconstruction scene, I would think. And yeah, it's going to be really interesting here, because how do you get a wound that's about an inch or an inch and a half straight on the back of your head, supposedly which broke the taillight of the SUV, breaking bones in the skull. However, not putting any other injuries on the body, nothing on the legs. The bumper somehow didn't strike anything, the shoulder, the back, the torso. The only other injuries were these weird scratches on his arm that do kind of look like dog bites or something similar. They certainly don't look like just minor abrasions. It's hard to imagine how those abrasions can be made in that accident, but that's something that the prosecution is going to have to come up with some theory for that. You can't just float this stuff out there without having a theory as to what happened. If the injuries don't match, I mean, granted, if the black box does show that there was an accident right at that time, which is, I think, the latest claim, although they haven't released the information specifically, it's just based on a claim that they made in court. Yeah, I mean, if the black box says that Karen Reed got in an accident going in reverse at that location, because it does record the location, at 12:31, or something within a minute or two of that, then you're really left with only 2 options. Either Karen Reed did hit him, or the conspiracy is so involved that you're now able to doctor reports from a black box. I just got to think that to be able to doctor reports from a black box, I don't know what's involved. I'm not a tech guy, but that seems to me you could fudge a report, but you would have to erase the data on that black box too in order to cover up the scene afterwards. And that would be incredibly suspicious. So if the state produces a report that says, well, this is what we found on the black box and it shows this, but oops, then we accidentally wiped the drive, so there's no more information on it. Sorry, you can't check it yourself. Well, goddamn, that would be incredibly suspicious. Well, okay, Julio, maybe you know more about me. I just researched it. What I found is there's a little device called the black box that goes behind the steering wheel, and it records every time there's a collision of 5 miles an hour or before. And so if that is when that collision happens, it's already recording everything continuously. It's able to, bam, the second it happens, create a record that shows the location, the direction, the speed of the vehicle. And I think now a better car will also have other information, like what was any pressure being applied on the brakes. That's a big thing, because a lot of times in a hit and run accident there wouldn't be that. But Karen Reed was driving a relatively new Lexus, I believe, Lexus XUV. So that's a very expensive, high technology vehicle. That's going to have all of the latest black box type stuff in it. I wouldn't even be surprised. I would guess that might even record video. So whether it's actually can be seen at night, I don't know. But it probably something would show up on it, I would think. But I don't know that for sure. I'm just totally guessing on that. Oh, what do I make of the bruising on the hands? When I look at that bruise, now all right, I want to say this, as accurate as possible. I worked in the bar industry for over 20 years. I'm no tough guy. I've seen a lot of tough guys. I've been in the middle of 1,000 fights, and I have bruised my hands in that way from punching people. I only do it in defense of myself or of another person. I'm one of those people that will not hit you unless I have to. And when I hit you and you go down, I stop. I'm not one of those people, like a lot of people can't turn that off. So I'm no tough guy, but I have seen a lot of bruised hands on my own and on other people. And that to me is what that hand looked like, the swelling in the knuckles and the bruise on the hands. However, that said, I've never looked at the hand of a corpse. I don't think anywhere, I guess like if you're in a wake, but that's a prepared body with makeup and stuff. Maybe the hands are on their chest. I haven't been to one in a few years. I can't even remember, so I don't have any experience looking at a corpse, what the condition might be. So maybe so you get rigor mortis if your hand is in such a way that the blood drains in that way. So I guess if your arm was like he was found on his back, if his arm was maybe underneath him, then you could maybe get bruising draining to the bottom part of your hand, right? Again, I'm just an old bartender. I don't know that shit, but it seems to me that there may be other explanations for that bruising and swelling on a corpse. He was not alive when the picture was taken. Okay, so he may have been alive. So yes, he was alive long enough to develop swelling and bruising. So yes, that could be bruising. It could be bruising. But it also could be rigor mortis if it's just blood settling there, because that picture was taken, I don't know how many hours after he was dead. But that was taken in as part of the autopsy. So does that make sense, where it could be bruising from a fight or it could not be? All right, so Slatherings, we have an idea. Slatherings proposes that he walked up and jumped onto the bumper and then back off. Would that register? Oh, I thought you were going to propose that he did that and fell on his head on the fire hydrant. Would that register as a collision? Collision? I don't know. You know, again, you're asking the wrong dude, but I mean, it has to be from what I read, it has to be a collision greater than 5 miles an hour. I would assume that involves the car has to be moving too. I'm not sure about that. So obviously parked cars get hit all the time. So if you got a parked car and somebody hits it, does that create a report on the black box? Well, not if the car's off. But what if you're sitting in a parked car that's running and somebody drives into the back? Does that trigger it? I don't know. That'd be a good question. I really don't know. TB just bought the same car. We should propose an experiment. Well, he's got a crush on Kieran Reed so much that he's got to buy the same car. I'm just kidding. Good thing 7-pounders in here. He'd get mad at me for that. If we were in a bar, he'd start a fight, and then I'd have to break it up. So, but I don't. That's a good car. Damn. I mean, I guess TB is doing very well in his show. God bless him. I mean, it's important, I think, to have media out there, and I make like $17 a month on my YouTube channel. That doesn't even come close to paying for the costs of video editing and things like that. So, but my ambition is not to make a living at this. Oh, he did. He got an inheritance. Okay, well, God bless him. You know, I don't want to get an inheritance. My parents, even though I'm older, my parents are, God bless them, still alive. And not that they're wealthy, but I'd rather they be alive. I don't want to get an inheritance. Well, if I have some like third generation uncle that I never met that's secretly a billionaire and he dies and leaves me some wealth, that'd be fantastic. But I don't see that happening. But maybe I will win the $600 million jackpot tonight. Oh, Slatherings says, if you hit another car, okay. So Slatherings, if you hit another car, I could see if you're hitting metal, but a person would just bounce off, wouldn't they? Yeah, I don't know how these detectors work. You know, there must be a sensor or sensors in the bumpers that detect these things. That would be my guess. I don't know how else you'd be able to detect it, unless it's just some kind of a recoil thing. But yeah, I don't know. All it says is it detects collision, so there must be sensors. Would be my guess, and that triggers it. Now, interestingly, if you what I now this may don't go out and try this, but if you happen to get in an accident tonight and you want to cover up the black box, if you go out and restart your car, I think it was 100 times or something. It'll eventually, if every time you restart the car, it's pushing that data further down. Just like, you know, like if you have a thing on your computer, a program, and it'll, like, let's say editing or writing, and you open it up and it'll store your most recent files. It may store 5 or 10. Well, it's the same thing on that. It stores in this, it stores the 100 most recent files, and then it starts getting rid of them. It deletes the 100th file every time. So if you restart your ignition 100 times, it'll delete that ignition that shows your accident. So you can actually cover it up that way. Or you can get into more accidents because it only stores 5 collision reports inside. So if you kill somebody, then maybe the next day, if you make a point of getting into 5 additional collisions, this is if they haven't already caught you, then if they get you and they get your black box, the data from that collision when you killed somebody won't be on it. Now, again, I'm sure every car is different. That's what I read. So I don't, I'm sure some vehicles are like that. I'm sure I don't know if I would say it's a standard. So I don't know. It seems like that would have to have something to do with their case. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is tricky. Like, why didn't they have reports on this stuff so much earlier? Why didn't they have the black box earlier? It does, because that would put so much of this to, I mean, really, let's just say hypothetically that you're Michael Proctor and you're Brian Albert, and you're Jen McCabe, and a whole bunch of other people connected to them, including Colin Albert. And it turns out that Karen Reed did this. And so those people are innocent. Well, their name's been dragged through the mud when it all could have been put to rest if that black box report was just a few months earlier. That's just criminal neglect on the part of the state. They couldn't do that. I mean, there's no lack of money in this state. We had like a $6 billion budget surplus last year. Get the fucking work done. There's no reason not to. Unless it's something corrupt going on, where they are trying to use some bullshit here to hide this stuff. So I'm 50-50. I don't really know. Some days I'm 60-40 one way, some days I'm 60-40 the other. I guess if you follow Turtle, you're supposed to be 100-0. And if anybody has even a 1% doubt, you're an idiot. So I guess I'm an idiot. What can you do? Drank too much in my life. So I'm going to just read the last few comments and then we'll end this shebang. Something to do with their case. I wouldn't buy planted black box data. Yeah, it's hard to buy, isn't it? But data extraction takes tons of time and happens in stages. That's interesting. Is that true? I don't know. I mean, I'm not, it sounds authentic, but how do you know that? I mean, it just doesn't seem like it should be that hard to get the data from the device. It's a drive. Good night, Slatherings. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, I mean, it's a drive. So why don't you just pull it off the drive? No, I know maybe there's some level of interpreting that data, but it seems to me pretty cut and dry, certain aspects of it. You look at you download the data and you look at it either. In fact, I've looked at samples of that data online. Now, I've looked at samples, Julio, of those reports. I wanted to see what they looked like. And you look at the sample of the black box data, and it's a printout that shows the time. It shows all the time, the location, and all that. It shows it all right there. So it's just a readout. So in the Murdoch case, I mean, we know that was corrupt, though, right? So I don't know. I didn't follow that case close enough to know what the black box data was or what the involvement was in that. We know there was corruption there. Because this guy was a former prosecutor and his family had been a long time connected to the courts, and he knew all the cops. So, so how fancy the system is for that the police have? Well, the Mass State Police have responded to Turtleboy, his accusations, in saying that they are one of the most elite police forces in the world. That's what they claim to be. So, and so how long did it take to get that car data? So we'll go with that, and then we'll check out. So we're down to 5 people. So unless somebody jumps in, gives us a good reason to keep going, because we've been going a long time. Yeah, I mean, but so wouldn't you think that a new car would have an easier to read drive and more? I mean, there may be some aspect of it that's open to interpretation, but I don't think it's that complicated. I mean, you're putting out it's got a GPS in it. It's got a GPS in it that's tracking continuously where the vehicle is, how fast it's going. Data like that, and probably data such as like braking and acceleration. Yeah, I've seen those reports before. Was the foot on the accelerator? What speed? How long? It tracks all that stuff, and it's just a report. You put it in the drive and you read it. All right, I wish you could too, brother. I wish you could too. We'll have to figure out how to do that. I've been talking about that for weeks, and I'm working on so many other things. I just haven't had time. I got to figure out a way to use OBS, or I could just. What we got to do is we'll do a live show over OBS that connects both to YouTube and to Facebook. In theory, it's supposed to be easy. I just haven't attempted it yet. And when we do that, then as long as we're friends on Facebook, or if we use Instagram, or maybe we could use it with like Discord or something like that, whatever people prefer. And then so put it like so then we can just invite you on, and then you can come on and just if you're here and you say I'd really like to explain this, I would know how to get you on. So I'm sorry, I have to learn how to do it. Twitch is easier. Okay, maybe we'll do Twitch. If you say that's easier, I believe you. I will look into setting it up with Twitch this week. I've just been so crazy busy. I built a website on this. It's public, but I haven't released the information yet because we're still trying to make it look a little more professional. But it's got some cool stuff on it. We're trying to get articles on it, and so if anybody out there wants to write for us or would like to, give us an article on any kind of a case, it could be on the Karen Reed case, whatever you want, as long as it's respectful, I'll put it up. If it's not some weird devil worshiping therapy or something, and you guys don't do that, so we'll put it up. So let me know. I've also been working on merch, believe it or not. It sounds crazy because it's the furthest thing from anything I've ever been interested in is to sell merch related to the website. But the reason I had to do it is because the editing program costs money, and there are other programs that cost that I pay a monthly fee to just to keep this thing going. And we decided we wanted to have a website, but the website costs $26 a month. So I need to start generating some revenue, not to cover all of it, but just to cover some of it, to justify the expense of maintaining a website. So I started looking into merch, and it turns, this print on demand. I had to go through, learn how to make artwork and put it up. Surprisingly, I've made some really cool shit. It doesn't necessarily, I've made some stuff that has to do with the channel, Yellow Cottage Tales or Yellow X and different things. But the coolest stuff is some images that have nothing to do with that, but it's just some cool images and some funny concepts on them. So I've already got them up, but I'm not going to make it public yet. I really want to make sure I've done it right, and it's a good quality shirt and stuff like that. But these are done by reputable. It's print on demand companies that make them, and they have a money back guarantee and stuff like that. So, but I'm just trying to make sure I'm doing everything right, and we'll put those links up on the website, and hopefully we sell. Man, the percentage you make on those things is so small. I'd have to, like the t-shirts, I think I'd have to sell like 100 a month to generate enough money, like $75 to cover the costs of the editing program, which is Adobe and the website, just for that. But if I can recover some of the costs, it'll be cool. But also, if we can get lucky and do more than that, that'll help fund the documentary series. So that will be really cool. Julio, if you live in Massachusetts and you want to join us on the shoot, get in touch with me. Let me know. I know if you follow the Karen Reed case, good chance you live in this area. So we'll be shooting in Lawrence and in Bridgewater for those first two ones. If you'd like to join us, that'd be cool. There's going to be probably 8 to 10 of us, and we're going to get together that morning, have some coffee, go over what we're going to do, go over that day. And some of us, we just meet each other for the first time, and we want to spend about a half hour. We're going to film that too. So they'll film us getting to know each other, and some of that might go into the documentary, and then we'll get off and start shooting at the scene. And anybody that wants to help us is welcome. And we've got other people that are joining us as researchers in various functions, but anything that people want to do, it's a team. It really is a team effort. I'm not looking to make money on it, and I know I never will. But if any money ever did start coming in by some miracle, it's all just going to go back into the channel anyways. So that's and now we would love to be able to make several $1,000s for the documentary series. But we're going to do a fundraiser for that, and I have some people some film contact people that I know that we're going to be able to pitch this to. The first shoot is on August 1st. So we'll be shooting, we're going to meet at Pandera Bread in North Andover. It's right off 495. And we'll meet there for about a half hour, and then we're going to shoot down to Lawrence. If you're worried about Lawrence, don't worry. It's going to be in the morning. We're not going to be in a dangerous area. We're going to have plenty of people with us, and we're going to have probably 2 people who are either law enforcement or former law enforcement that are with us. So we're going to be very safe. It's not going to be an issue. And actually, in the area we're filming is not far from where there's a police presence, because it's near the high school, and there's always police near the high school, even during the summer. So it's August 1st. It's a Tuesday. So if you have a regular job at that time, I understand. But if you want to make it, I don't know, I'm not sure where you're traveling from or how far you're coming. Because if you live South Shore, the next phase of it that afternoon, I grew up in Lawrence. The next phase of it, the afternoon, will be in, I'm sorry, that same day in the afternoon, we'll be in Bridgewater. So Bridgewater State. And it's a 1-day shoot. So we're just doing those two locations. And then we're going to get a lot of good material from that, enough that'll go into part 1 and part 2, up into the series. But the main goal for this is also to get good stuff for the trailer. And then with the trailer, we're going to, we have a professional video editor, and we're going to meticulously put this together and then use that to fundraise and to pitch. Like I said, I know some film people, so we're going to pitch and see if somebody wants to back it. I know some people with some deep pockets that are interested in making a documentary. So what we have to do is just make it good enough to intrigue them. And so I think it's going to be a lot. And then if we can raise that money, we'll start filming. We'll continue the filming, but filming more in earnest, probably for a whole week longer if we have more money in the fall. That would be the goal. So if we don't get the money by then, maybe for some other reasons, we have to wait till the spring or something like that. But we would really love to be able to film in October, particularly late October, which is such a beautiful time of year around here, even in Lawrence. And we have other locations we want to go to. Those are the two we're going to on Tuesday, August 1st. But later on, we'll be going to Brockton, Revere, Providence, Webster. I know I'm missing 1 or 2 locations, but those are the main locations, and anything else that comes up, because it is kind of an investigation too. So there might be things that come up. If hopefully we know Dave McGrath will be fully on board with us. If Melanie's with us by then, maybe she has some areas that she wants us to go to. And so we'd love to go with her, or however she wants to do it. So Melanie is also an Emmy award-winning director, which is kind of huge. Yeah, Brockton, I know, we're going to some exciting places, Revere and Brockton and Lawrence. Melanie's an Emmy award-winning documentary maker. And so she's from my city, Lawrence. That's one of the more prouder things to happen to my city. We don't have a lot of rocket scientists from Lawrence. So for someone to win an Emmy coming from Lawrence is a big deal for me. I'm proud of it. And so hopefully maybe she might want to direct an episode, or I don't know, whatever level she wants to give us, bring her experience onto the project. I have no ego. I just want to see a good project get done. So if she evolves more in a leadership direction, we'll see how it goes, or maybe she just wants to come out with us one day and talk to us and then do her own thing. I mean, she may have some other plan. That's okay with her. That's okay. She's been working on this stuff for years, and I'm sure she has a different way of seeing how this project would go forward. My vision for this project centers on Melanie and Dave, particularly Dave, but really both of them equally if they both come on board equally, because for me, it's not just about the investigation itself, it's about the investigators, because these guys have spent years hunting down these monsters, but they were victims at one time of monsters. It's the kind of thing that scarred them for life. And so to me, that makes this personal story extremely compelling. And I want to see, they both want justice, and I want to help play my small part in seeing that happen. And everybody that's joined, pretty much everybody that's joined our team, that's their only interest. There are a couple other people that are initially joining it now just because they are filmers and they want to add something good to their portfolio. And so they're willing to come out to do it for a day and then see if we raise funding to pay them to do it further. That's fine too. They may be more interested in it at this point as just kind of a career thing. But I think once they get involved and they see what we're working on, a lot of them will probably say, this is a good group of people and it's a good cause, and they'll be motivated by the same reasons we are, which is to bring justice for the victims and to the monsters. So, but Man, this has been a nice long show, and it was great having you, Julio. I'd like to, so I will. You just expressed earlier an interest on coming on, and any one of our regulars that wants to come on, I fully welcome it. Then I can drink more. So we got to figure that out. And if you're a tech guy, I left my number earlier in the show. You give me a call or give me an email, and we will figure out. Maybe you can help me do this. Maybe we can. Maybe if you're almost definitely smarter than me, so we can figure out how to do it together. My big problem is I attempted to go Facebook Live, and there was a problem. I kept getting this. It would pop up, and my friends and my family were saying you're on, but we can't see you. And I don't want anybody to see me. You can't do like with YouTube. You can. The first time I did a live on YouTube, I just set it to private and did it myself, so I could practice it. I don't see any way to do that on Facebook. So when you go live, everybody sees you. There's no way to just go through the motions of practicing it. So that first time when I went live, there was some kind of error message saying that the frame rate was wrong on my computer. So you're trying to fix it live while people are saying, hello, what's going on? Hey, what's up? So I had to hang up on him, message him saying, I'm sorry, I was just trying to figure this out. And then Google and try to figure out the problem. And I never was able to figure out the problem. Nothing that it, every setting that it told me to go in and check was already right on my computer. So the only thing I found that might be helpful was it says that that it's better to use the Chrome browser. And I usually use the Edge browser. So next time I will try it on Chrome, but I hate that I can't go private, because if I try it on Chrome and I go live, and unless I want to try it at 3:00 in the morning, I'm giving that notice to everybody that I'm on. But if it's not working, I can't, it sucks. I don't want to be trying to fix it live, So I don't know. I guess so unless somebody else knows better how to do these things, I guess I'll just try to bite the bullet and do it live. Or maybe Twitch will work better. Maybe we can try it with Twitch. So we'll do, I'll set up the OBS with the Twitch and YouTube, and we'll do it on that. So thank you very much for being here, everybody. It's still supposedly 5 people left. God bless you. If you're my family, I wish you'd say hi, but we'll do it, Julio. Thank you very much for being understanding and for pointing out areas where I maybe was not as accurate or as sensitive as I should be on it. So I'll try to do better. Thanks, man. Have a good night, everybody.